announcements about recording and microphones and things. And also, Derek, if you could give us any apologies as well, please.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you for that. I will just remind all persons in the call, Chair, Vice Chair and members that this meeting is being recorded. You may wish to consider muting your microphone and video unless you are participating in an active session. This will be screened later on today for the benefit of public sharing. I will go through the roll call, at which point I'll do the apologies at that time, Chair, just to indicate who's on the go and who isn't. If I can start with Councillor Duncan, who has spoken to me and I can confirm she is present. Luann Grugan.
Good morning, Derek, I'm here.
Good morning, thank you for that. Councillor Al Samurai has tendered an apology, and the current substitute member, Councillor Cook.
Good morning, I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Bell.
Present and correct, sir.
Thank you. Councillor Dunbar.
Good morning, Derek.
Good morning to you. Kim Cruttenden.
Morning.
Morning. Alan Gray. Not yet, as we know, possibly delayed. John Tomlinson.
Yeah, I think I'm here. It seems to be going on and off, but yeah, I'm here at the moment. Thank you.
You're certainly here. Thank you for that. Sandra MacLeod.
Yes, I'm here, Derek. Thanks.
Thank you. Alex Stephen.
Yes, I'm here.
Caroline Howarth. Not seeing Caroline. Chris Litterjohn has tendered apologies, Chair. Mike Adams.
Yeah, here.
Jenny Gibb.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. Jim Curry.
Yes, I'm here, thanks.
Morning. Graham Simpson.
Here, Derek, thank you.
Morning, thank you. Maggie Hepburn.
Morning, everyone. I'm here.
Good morning, Maggie. Shona McFarlane.
Good morning, Derek.
Good morning. Alison Murray.
Morning, I'm here.
Good morning. Howard Gemmell.
I'm here, Derek.
Good morning. I believe Angela Scott has tendered interim apologies as well. Yeah, not getting shouted at. And ECC Legal, Jess Anderson.
Good morning, Derek.
Good morning to you. There are several other attendees, authors and observers, Chair, as communicated out with the meeting. And I'm here as clerk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Derek. And again, welcome to everybody and to the observers today. We'll introduce you at the beginning of your items. We also have a best value auditor observing our meeting today, and I'm just checking. So welcome to that person. I'm sorry, I've lost your name. I have so many bits of paper on my desk.
Sorry, hi. This is Lindsay.
Morning,
on my face. Hi. Yeah, observing from home and technology working so far, so that's great. Thanks very much.
Okay, you're very welcome. Right, we're also, so I think in the pre-meeting chat with Councillor Cook, it was confirmed that Councillor Al Samurai, who's been on the board since 2017, is stepping back, and Councillor Cook is going to be joining us properly. I'd just like to pay tribute to Jill's work on the IJB. She always made relevant and very robust comments and challenges. I think she kind of exemplified the governance that we have, the governance role that we have as members of the board. And I think she's done a power of work on the IJB, and I'm sorry to see her go, but I'm very glad to welcome Councillor Cook to the board. And if we could minute our thanks to Councillor Al Samurai, please, Derek, that would be very helpful. We're also...
That will be done, Chair. I was just going to advise you, Alan Gray has also joined the meeting as well at this time.
Okay, great, thank you. We're also meeting on World AIDS Day, and I'm very proud that Aberdeen, through the IJB, was the first Scottish city to sign up to be a fast track cities last year, and it's playing its part in trying to achieve the aim of having zero transmissions for HIV by 2030. I mean, it's a tough ask, and it's a lot of work to kind of tackle stigma and discrimination for people living with HIV in our community. So I think it's important that we note that today as well, that it's apt we're meeting on World AIDS Day today. Okay, we'll move on to the items of business. Are there any declarations of interest? I don't see any hands. Okay. We've got some exempt business we've got item 15, which are the project initiation document for the tender for the 2C remodeling case. So if anybody wants to raise any issues relating to that particular document in the 2C item, which is item 12, we'll have to go into private session and we'll take that at the end of the meeting. I'll remind you of that when we come to item 12. Okay, we have standing items now. So we have the minute of our last meeting on the 28th of October. I'll take it for accuracy and matters arising at the same time, so stick up the hand. So we're on page 7 of the pack, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12.
We do have a hand.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sarah. It was just to pick up on the discussion we had around the NHS Grampian renewal paper and the action to seek views from our locality empowerment groups around that paper. I just wondered how that's going to be done and how the views from our legs will be fed back to us.
We have an officer to give a contribution on that.
Hi, Sarah, do you want me to respond to that? I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch the question.
Yes, thank you, Alison. It's about how we're going to get the views of our locality empowerment groups on the NHS Grampian renewal paper that we discussed last IJB. It's page 11 of the pack. We said that the locality empowerment groups would benefit from awareness of the Short Life Working Group and the report.
Yeah, so we're currently working with our locality empowerment groups to arrange the various topics that we have to discuss with them. We're still at quite an early stage of development with them, and we need to take them along with us in terms of what their agenda will be. So we will get that on their agendas for one of their meetings, and we will feed back any output from that. The locality empowerment groups, in terms of their governance, they feed up through the strategic planning group. So we can, but if we want a specific report to come back to IJB, we can certainly, on that particular topic, we can certainly arrange for that to happen.
Okay, Luann, are you happy with that?
Yeah, thanks. It was just to make sure we hadn't lost sight of it, and it may not require a paper to come back, but just if we can keep that on our radar and decide once we get the feedback how best to progress with it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Alison. So we were on page 12, page 13, page 14, final page. So we're content to approve those minutes as an accurate record. Yes, I don't see any dissent on that. Right, the next item is the draft minute of the Risk Audit and Performance Committee from the 3rd of November. This is for noting. John, do you wish to make any comment about that meeting? John Tomlinson.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Just highlight 3 things there quickly. Finance reporting, which will come through in January, and it'll be a bit of a double header with the committee looking at deep dive at the scrutiny and then at the IJB. So it's important that that comes through to us. So thanks to the Chief Finance Officer for organising that for January. Asset management, just one point in addition to what's minuted there, in that the next strategy will have a specific section or part So the refresh of our strategy in 2022, I think it is, will indicate where we are around assets. So that was discussed at the committee. And then the third one is just the alcohol and drug partnership, which has been referred on to today, and the members will have seen that. So thank you.
Right, thank you very much, John. Thank you for that. We're now on to the draft minute of the Clinical and Care Governance Committee of the 24th of November. Well done for the quick. I don't think we have that minute available, but Leslie, is there anything from that meeting, Leslie Dunbar, that you'd wish to highlight to the board?
Yes, thank you, Chair. There was the Clinical and Care Governance Monitoring Report, and we've decided that we'd like some more robust reporting in terms of performance indicators coming forward, or at least starting that process to get, you know, as I say, maybe a bit more rigor into our performance framework. We also had some really good reports as well. The COVID-19 response in care homes report, and also the delivering care at home and house and support services during COVID report. And we also had a bit of a discussion around the paper with the monitoring and evaluation of primary care in Scotland in terms of the baseline position.
Thank you. Sandra, I think I'll put you on the spot here about the way forward for performance reporting, both to CCG and the Risk and Audit and Performance Committee, and also the IJB. I think you've had some preliminary thoughts on how we're going to take that forward. So would you like to update the board just now on that?
Certainly can, Chair. So we're looking for each of the performance indicators of our main objectives to be split between the risk audit and performance and clinical care governance. But we are very mindful as we progress through at the moment that we have other pieces of evaluation work going on, for example, through the Home First agenda. What we're very mindful of is that what we have at the moment is a wide range of performance indicators that are both national, both local, and have been picked up from different areas. We're also very mindful that up until now, and up until very recently, what we would often do is start a project and then consider how we were going to manage its performance and its evaluation. So as we progress through the development of our 2022 strategic plan, we'll be working in a much more embedded way. So the team round about strategy, performance and transformation will be absolutely understanding when we say in our strategic plan, this is what we're going to be doing, we'll have that data and those measures embedded very early on. So at the moment, we are working through and working to the current indicators, but it is quite light touch. And we will be looking to have a specific report coming to clinical care governance and to risk audit and performance from each of the key leads within the partnership to help with that data collection as well, while we still progress a much more robust and evaluative framework for our new strategic plan. So
okay.
Comfortable with that, Chair?
Yes, I'm very comfortable with that. Does anybody have any comments on that before I move on, just quickly? We can, Leslie, yes. You go.
I think that sounds really positive, Sandra. I think in terms of helping us to go forward to build a more robust, rigorous framework. Great, good news.
I think we've learned from drawing up the Operation Home First plans, actually embedding the relevant performance indicators from the start. Kind of sharpens the whole thing up and makes the performance indicators properly relevant and easily understandable. Alison, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to add to what Sandra said earlier, that community planning are in the process of refreshing the LOIP. And we'll be working closely with them to ensure that the stretch outcomes and the performance indicators within the LOIP are mapped across to our performance indicators within our new strategic plan.
Great, thank you. I like to see joined up working. That's great. Thank you very much. Okay, We're now on to the business planner, which is item 7. Alex, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean the business planner's as outlined. We've put in place, we've put explanations to why reports have been delayed. A new meeting has been organised for the 27th of March, where we're going to take some finance information, also Bunacore Care's annual report, and then an update on the vaccination and immunisation programme. So that's all looking good for the 27th of January, and we've then got a meeting on the 23rd of February. I think we need to sit down after this meeting and then just profile out what we're planning to do over the rest of the year. Would be my recommendation in terms of thinking about what's going to come where, so we've got a little bit more information going a wee bit further out than it has just now. But information as reported, and happy to take any comments or questions.
Okay, thank you, Alex. I think it's clear from the business planner that we've pretty much caught up with the backlog that was generated because of the COVID work that needed done. And our budget meeting will be in March. The list of dates for meetings for 21-22 were agreed at the last IJB. So we will update the business planner in time for the January meeting, so we can see forward into 2021 for items. Has anybody got any comments or questions on the business planner? Right, I don't see any hands. Oh yes, okay. Alex, yes.
Yeah, I should have probably just said in the intro. We're expecting to hear around about our financial settlement about the end of January. So it will be quite tight for our meeting schedule, and also we've got to choreograph that with what's happening within the NHS and the council as well. So just giving you a heads up around about that. But I will try and bring as much information as I can, so you know the scale of the challenge, and then we can work back from there once we get the funding finalised. So that's just some information that's come about over the last couple of weeks.
Okay, I think it is important that we have a finance update on the position as it stands at the 27th of January, accepting that we almost certainly won't know what the budget allocation is for 21-22 at that point. But just so everybody's up to speed with where we do stand at the end of January as we move into the budget planning process. Okay, thank you for that, Alex. I will note that. Right, item 8 is the Chief Officer's report. So Sandra, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So the Chief Officer's report gives you updates on various local and national areas, but I would like to highlight a few areas, and then I'm happy to take any questions from members. So we've been making steady progress has been made in the flu vaccinations, and we still await information from Scottish Government when the 55 to 64-year-olds will commence. There's a huge amount of work and planning that has went into this from the team, and as we said, continue to make steady progress. In addition to this, we continue to work closely with NHS Grampian, as we are a key delivery partner in preparing for the COVID vaccination, so planning is well underway for that, and the team are around that as well. There'll be further updates to come. The Care at Home contract has now commenced with the Granite Care Consortium, which is made up of 10 providers, which is a unique consortium because it's both independent and third sector providers. We've worked quite closely and continue to work closely to embed, define and improve the process in this new and innovative way to just ensure that people are supported to live as independently as possible at home within the city. We've also had initial verbal feedback on the criminal justice inspection and expect the draft report to be with us on the 22nd of December. Feedback on the self-assessment, the engagement of staff, service users in the system and the general organisation was very positively commented from the inspectors, so we anticipate some positive reflection of that in the report. The team are working through the Adult Social Care Winter Plan and the implications I think that has in conjunction with our other winter planning. And I suppose finally, we'd just like to state my thanks to all the staff across the partnership for continued commitment and their hard work during these times, which are particularly testing up resilience as we maintain and going through COVID. It's certainly appreciated. And just open to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. there are questions. John Cook.
Thank you. On the 55 to 64, I can confirm I already got my letter. I know I don't look that old, but I've already got my letter inviting me. And sorry to sound like a broken record on the questions on lessons learned from when we do from flu to when we do COVID. Are we? Do you think we are in a position to send people to centres near to where they stay rather than near to where the GP practice that they're registered with is?
Sorry, Councillor Cook, in response to the flu vaccinations or the COVID vaccinations?
The COVID, because I know for flu, we're already in the process, so
okay.
You can't change horses midstream, but when we do the next lot, when we get to the COVID.
So the planning for the COVID response has been done at an NHS Grampian level. There's an executive lead, obviously the Director of Public Health, whom with the responsibility for vaccinations across the city lies. With that, we have senior responsible officers that have been aligned from our leadership team, and then we have a team that are working locally. So all of the lessons learned, there was a hot debrief done. So all of that things that were pulled in about what we got right and what we didn't get quite as right during the flu vaccine, all that lessons have been pulled in together, and they're at that centralised planning, and we're feeding into that and taking lessons from that.
Thanks, that's helpful.
I think Dr. Jemison said that they are looking at centres, so they're looking at central and local options for COVID vaccination. Right, thanks for that question, John. Luann?
Thanks, Sarah. Two questions, or well, one's an observation really. It's around the governance of the COVID-19 vaccines, and as you're quite right saying that the Health and Social Care Partnership are a delivery partner, but the overall accountability lies with NHS Grampian. I'm just wondering if it might be helpful for the IJB to get an overview of the governance arrangements, so that as an IJB we're clear as to where we should be putting our scrutiny, and not duplicate maybe what other boards are looking at.
Yeah, certainly that's a good question. We had hoped to have something with you today, but unfortunately timing wasn't quite right. But we're going to pull together a briefing paper for all the IJB members, and we can circulate that. So absolutely key point, Luann, and we'll take that forward.
Great, thank you. And my other question was, I was just really pleased to see the Health Improvement Programme starting to review priorities and take into account COVID, and also looking at that cross-system, Grampian-wide, so that we're not just necessarily working in silos unless there's good reason to. I just wondered when we're likely to get a report on the revised priorities for the Health Improvement Plan, and when that's likely to come to the IJB. Thank you.
Alison's good.
Would you like me to come in on that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Luann, we're probably not going to manage to, timing-wise, not going to manage to bring a report in January. We will try to bring one in February, but if not March, you'll certainly get one before the end of the financial year.
Thank you. John Tomlinson.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the report. It's a really helpful updates. Just looking at the care at home one, I'm just noticing the comment around different pathways being developed, and just really wanted to highlight, so it's not so much a question, but highlighting that in reporting back to us, it's going to be very helpful for this initiative and other initiatives if we can get information which compares what the pathway was to what it is in future, and that will help us to see the system changes and the transition. So it's welcome that it's got to this stage. It's just to highlight that for future reporting. Once that information is available, will be really helpful. Thanks.
Can I respond, Chair? We'll definitely take that on board, and I think that with regards to the stepped care approach, the localities, that all of those new different ways of working and how they're embedded and working with our key partners across the system will help do that. But we'll definitely make reference to previous and how that starts to move forward. So we could take that on board. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, John? No. Leslie.
I just wondered if we could consider a briefing paper maybe going to all council members with regard to the COVID, vaccination programme. Not, I mean, the governance for sure, but just a kind of update, because I know there's a lot of interest and and members are getting questions around, some of how it's going to work.
So my understanding, Chair, is that NHS, Councillor Dunbar, is that NHS Grampian have a system for updating both elected members and updating each of the 3 IGBs on that. But I can certainly take that back to the Chief Execs and state that that's a request to get that information shared.
Thank you.
Thank you. Angela, you want to come in here?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Duncan. Just to confirm, Councillor Dunbar, I've been in dialogue with the DPH, and just as Ms Ross said, the NHS Grampian will do a local update and agreement that the national newsletter that's being issued around COVID vaccination, that I'll certainly issue that to all council members. So you'll have access to the national newsletter and then an update from DPH at a local level, Councillor Dunbar.
That's great, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I don't see any other hands up, so we'll just note that report. Thank you very much, Sandra. That was very comprehensive, that Chief Officer report. So we're on to item 9 now, which is the Strategic Risk Register and Revised Risk Appetite Statement. I think we'll have Martin Allen to introduce this, please.
Hi, Chair, and thanks for that. Yeah, the report before the members presents the amended version of the risk appetite statement, as well as the latest version of the strategic risk register. The IGB held a workshop in October, and members considered the risk appetite statement and made some amendments to this document to reflect the experience of responding to COVID. The revised statement is attached as Appendix A to the report. Since the risk register was last submitted to the IGB, work has been undertaken on the template. This has included the introduction of a risk rating matrix for each of the strategic risks, and this was also considered at the workshop on the 20th of October. At the workshop, members also made suggested amendments and additions to the strategic risks, and these have been made in the version attached to this report at Appendix B. It's recommended that the IGB comment on and approve the board's risk appetite statement and the revised strategic risk register as appended to the report. The risk owners who are present are happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Martin. So we're asked to comment on this. So do I have any comments? Yes, John Cook and then Philip Bell, please.
Thanks. Sorry to sound like a broken record, profuse apologies. The risk appetite statement still includes the sentence, we will be looking to move to a mature risk appetite over time. I've never understood what that means. I still don't understand what it means. I can't explain it to anybody. I thought at the workshop we said we'd take it out. I'm sorry, it's just one of my hobby horses. It's like split infinitives or things like that. Sorry. Can we take it out, please? Actually, if you want to keep it in, and I'll shut up.
Okay. I have some sympathy with that, John. I do know what we're intending to say there, which is that we want to get more comfortable with taking decisions that are riskier if the circumstances justify it. Would you be happy for us to go away and look at the use of the word mature instead, and then find another way to express that sentiment, which is that as the board develops, it becomes more confident in taking riskier decisions, higher risk decisions?
I'd be delighted with that, because actually I think that's absolutely the right thing to do. The sentiment is totally, it's just the kind of, it's yes. Kind of got into my mind as one of these irritating things, like I don't know, the cat destroying the Christmas tree or whatever. But yeah, no, totally agree, totally like the sentiment. Happy to have a different form of words that expresses the sentiment. So yeah, that would be great.
Okay, are you okay with that, Martin, to go away and just tweak that sentence a bit to?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, great. Philip Bell and then John Tomlinson, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm quite pleased to see that the layout of the risk is actually somewhat easier to understand now. It's easier, much easier to drill down. So thank you for the work that's been done on that. So question really is actually risk 2. Very high risk here, risk of financial failure. Can I ask where we are with regard funding, where we are on that particular risk that's been identified?
I'll bring Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Stephen, in here, but I'll say that I refer back to my remarks on the business planner. That's why we're getting a report in January on our financial position, I think. Alex, you?
Yeah, so I think when we brought a report to the last meeting, there was additional funding that had been provided by the Scottish Government around about the cost of COVID, and that was included, but there was still more funding to come. So there still is a little bit of potential uncertainty about what that level of funding is going to be. What we're planning on doing is bringing a report back in January, which will, at that point in time, we should have more certainty in terms of what our financial position is going to be for the whole financial year, but also what the level of funding that's going to be distributed from the Scottish Government will be as well. So still working on it. There's still a risk. The risk decreases as more funding becomes available, but we've also got to bear in mind that there may be movements and things that come through as a result of COVID, either directly or indirectly, that we need to manage at a local level. So we're working our way through that, and there'll be more information and certainly a lot more detailed information at the next January meeting around about the level of potential spend for the IJB and the funding sources as a result of that.
Thank you for that, Alex. So from what you're saying then, I understand there'll be a report brought in the new year. So more funding is being made available from what you're saying.
Yes,
it has been made available.
Yep. So funding has been made available, and more funding will be made available as a result of that. The response to the pandemic changes it seems like on a daily basis in terms of some, and so do the financial implications. So particularly around about the social care providers, sustainability. There's discussions about changing or modifying the rules around about that scheme, and so that will have an additional financial implication on us, and then we'll have to get that money back from the Scottish Government to cover that additional financial implication. And the same sort of some of the other things that have been announced recently within the press, again, I'd anticipate that having a financial implication for us, and we'll have to go and reclaim that money or be funded. But the mechanisms are changing, and we need to work our way through that. So there's still a little bit of uncertainty, but it's starting to firm up. And as I say, in January, I've lined up the accountancy teams to have a really good look at the monitoring to make sure that we have a good understanding of what the outcome is going to be at the end of the financial year, and then we'll be taking that into the Scottish Government funding process.
Thank you.
Okay. Are you content, Philip?
Yes, thank you very much.
Philip, on your remarks about the formatting, I really welcome that. And actually, I'd like to pay tribute to you, because you did a lot of work behind the scenes with Martin, and you were like a dog with a bone on this one. And I think it was to everybody's benefit that you persisted. So thank you very much for your contribution to making the risk register easier for people to understand. John Tomlinson and then Alan Gray, please.
Okay, thanks. Just a quick comment was really, you've just stolen that, Sarah. That's what I was going to say. I was going to say constructively dug his heels in, but I think it was a good outcome, and that was good work on that. So my question is on risk 9, which is the other very high one that we have, and it's the importance of the workforce strategy around this. So it's just a quick question to say, when would that be coming back to us? Is that coming through RAP, or will that come to the IJB, and what sort of timescale are we looking at?
Alex, another one for you.
Yeah, some time ago we produced our workforce plan, and that was we brought that forward to the IJB, but I'm aware that there's a requirement to come back to Resource Audit and Performance Committee with a result of that, with that information and an update. I think what we've seen over the last wee while is we probably, there's a number of policies and a number of strategies that will need to be reviewed in light of what the new health and social care sector looks like as a result of COVID. So we will need to do some work on that and refresh some of that information. And we also need to be mindful about the available workforce within the city. And I think this risk in particular was highlighted. It was largely in relation to some of the implications of the Primary Care Improvement Fund, and concern that that required additional staffing around about some of the new bits that were going to fall within that priority. So I think what we're going to do is we'll take stock of that, review that. We've also got to be mindful of the independent review of adult social care as well, and how that may impact on our staffing going forward as well. So there is an opportune time for a review, and certainly we'll be looking to take that in its first instance through the Risk Audit and Performance Committee.
Okay. You happy with that, John? Yep.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Alan Gray and then Alison Murray, please.
Yeah, it was probably related to Philip's, but it was a bit about just whilst we've been very much focused on risks that have been kind of what I call kind of immediate, much more short term in nature. It's that bit about the time horizon we're looking at in terms of at some point over the near future we have a bit of a view about the time horizon, both in the medium term, what's coming over the hill, so to speak, in terms of opportunities and risks. And quite a lot's happened in the last year that will give us new opportunities. It might create some new risks for us. And I was just keen that, related to the financial bit, whilst I guess Alex very much focused on the next 15 months, we also need to have that kind of line of sight to the financial resources that may become available in a 3 to 5 year cycle. I know there's a lot of uncertainty around that, but I think one of the strengths of an IGB is we've always kind of tried to look a little bit further ahead and try and anticipate. And I think, looking at the risk register again at some point in the near future with that kind of time horizon being a little bit longer than the very immediate things would be a good opportunity for us to be able to sort of try and anticipate what might be coming in that kind of medium long-term perspective. So really no more than that, and really to support what Philip had said around the kind of financial stuff.
Okay, yes, thank you very much for that, Alan. That's a kind of unusual take and a very welcome one on how we should perhaps look at the risk register and also see our financial position going forward. So we'll bear that in mind when we get the finance paper coming in January. We'll have the refresh of our medium-term financial strategy as well. It does take that longer perspective. It's nice to hear somebody being optimistic about resources in the future. That's very, very encouraging. I wish you were a politician. Okay, we've got Alison Murray and then Luann.
Hi, yes, thanks. At the workshop, there was discussion on the risk appetite statement about under the risk to harm and harm to clients and staff, about recognising also a risk to unpaid carers who obviously don't fall into either staff or client category. I noticed there's no mention of it now. I was just wondering if there's a reason.
Martin, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, and the risk appetite statement is here for the board to consider today. So if members of the board wish to include any additions to that, then that's for the board to decide and to approve.
Right. I'm just trying to have brought up the risk appetite statement. So that's the fourth box down in the dimensions of risk. Yeah. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
We do have statutory obligations as well as obligations we adopt because they're not legal to the carers. I think it would be appropriate to put that in that box. Somebody else have any views on that?
I would agree with that, Sarah. I think it's very appropriate to highlight unpaid carers. Yeah.
Okay, so we're happy to amend the wording on to risk of harm to clients, staff, and unpaid carers. It's an explicit, broader perspective for us now. Okay, right. Thank you, Alison. We'll do that.
Thank you.
Luann?
Thanks, Sarah. So I suppose it's just for completeness that we will continue to monitor these risks over the year in the way we've been doing previously. So some of them go into RAPS, some come into IJB, and then 12 months from now, we will do a full review to incorporate the horizon scanning that Alan has suggested. Is that the timescales and actions we're thinking, so that we've got ongoing rigour over the risk register, but also at sort of a point in time where we're going to review the whole register again? Is that the plan?
Yes, I think so. And I think the way that we did it, having a workshop, was helpful. And we'd be starting that process in the autumn, intending to take the whole risk register back to the IJB this time next year. Is that right, Martin? Is that your understanding as well?
Yeah, in terms of the board assurance escalation framework, it states that the strategic risk register would be considered both by the IJB and the RAP committee twice, both occasions. And if the board were wanting to have that kind of annual review on a regular basis, then yeah, fitting in a workshop like we did this year in October to bring it back to the equivalent meeting this time next year sounds like a plan.
Okay,
good. Thank you.
Good. Right, great. Alan, your hand's up, and so is Alex. So Alan first. Alan Gray.
Sorry, that's an old hand. Yeah, sorry, I'll put that down. Sarah, apologies for that. Yeah.
No, that's no bother. Alex.
Yeah, but just really in terms of the workshop, so we certainly will be having a workshop around about, the risk register. And I think what I would also highlight to members is that if a new risk comes up during the year, then and that impacts on what we see to be the delivery of the IJB strategic plan. If that's fed back, then we can certainly do a little bit of work on that risk as well. So the document does move in terms of actually monitoring the risks, but if new risks become available, then we obviously need to react to that, and we will react to that and include it in there. But the annual process of review, I think, is helpful, and I also think that the information and the discussions that we've had in the workshops have also been very helpful in the past and helped to move this forward. So thanks for that.
Thank you. So I think we're clear about the process to keep the strategic risk register at the forefront of our minds as we go through. So that's good. I just want to bring up one final risk here. COVID has swamped everything else this year, but Brexit is fast approaching, and we have a specific Brexit risk, number 10. I think in light of Alex's comments, I'd just like some reassurance that we're still monitoring the potential impact of Brexit on our service delivery, particularly the impacts on recruitment and retention of staff, finance, pharmacy. Who's available to comment on that?
I can do that, Chair. So in terms of risk 10, the current performance section of that risk hopefully updates the IJB members in terms of what both ACC and NHS Grampian are doing. Excuse me. And that includes the from the council point of view, having a monthly meeting of the EU exit group, and that also includes inputting into the corporate risk register through the council, which includes the staffing matters that you raised there as well. We're also receiving regular updates through NHS Grampian in terms of procurement matters, etc. So, as I said, the current performance section hopefully provides that assurance.
Okay. Thank you. Alan.
It was no more than to reassure you that I'm the executive lead for the EU response within the NHS, to say with Martin, happy to link in and share with Martin anything that we're doing, because a lot of the responsibilities will lie with the two partners, I guess, the NHS and the local authority, just to reassure you we're doing a significant amount of work. And it is also significant work we've done at Scottish National and UK government level in terms of supporting the response. So I'm more than happy to share with Martin any of the updates. I've just done a more comprehensive update, and I'm happy that to be shared with board members regarding what we are doing as a board to support the continuity of service on your behalf.
Okay. No, that's very important. I think given that we've got a meeting at the end of January, perhaps it would be sensible to include an update on the Brexit outturn, either in the Chief Officer's report or, if it warrants it, as a separate standalone report on the agenda. But we can consider that at the pre-agenda stage. And I obviously don't want to create additional work for officers at an incredibly busy time of year with, we're in the middle of the winter surge, we've got the budget issues coming up, we're still dealing with COVID. But I think we do need to keep our eye on the impact that proper Brexit at the end of this year might have on our ability to provide services. So if officers could consider whether it would be appropriate for us to have a separate report in January, or whether it can be included in the Chief Officer's report, I'd be grateful. Thank you. So we've commented on the report as we requested. Are we happy to approve it with the amendments that we've discussed today? So we're going to tweak the wording and remove the word mature, which always reminds me of cheese rather than risk, actually. So I've got a bit of sympathy with Councillor Cook there. And we're also going to add in unpaid carers into the risk dimension. I don't see anybody complaining, so that's good. Thank you. And thank you for your work on this, Martin. It's a bit like painting the Forth Rail Bridge, isn't it, doing the risk register. Thank you for all your work on this. Right, we're now on to item 10, which is an update on effective working in localities. And I think, is this Alison McLeod?
It is indeed. Thank you, Chair. So following a report that we brought to IJB in December 2019, we were tasked with bringing a report back to this meeting on the commitments that we had made within that initial report in relation to progressing the 4 phases of implementing locality working. This report that you have in front of you today details a number of positive developments in relation to the development of the locality empowerment groups, the upskilling of these and also of our operational teams, and the integration of locality working. Most of these developments were progressed in the midst of the restrictions in place during the COVID pandemic, it's fair to say that the officers have done a really good job working around about those. The most exciting development, however, is in relation to the proposed integration and alignment of the IJB localities with the community planning localities, which is as a result of very positive partnership working between health and social care staff and our partners in community planning. The paper contained at Appendix A is a draft of a paper to be considered by the Community Planning Aberdeen Board on Thursday, and it details the collaborative review of community planning arrangements that was undertaken and the proposals which aim to reduce duplication of effort and to streamline the landscape for community engagement, offering a clear, accessible route which makes it easier, simpler and more appealing for our communities to engage. It's hoped that this will enable stronger representation of community views in service and strategic planning, which will in turn lead to person-led delivery and improved outcomes. My colleague Michelle Coughlin, who is Community Planning Manager from Aberdeen City Council, is in attendance today, and between us we hope to be able to respond to any queries you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. Michelle, given that you've come along, would you like to say a few words about the new landscape for community engagement and the partnership working between community planning and Aberdeen City Council and the IJB and the Health and Social Care Partnership?
Yep, just briefly to say that I think it's been a really positive piece of collaborative working that we've done, taking forward this review and sharing our experience that we've both had in taking forward the locality planning models in Aberdeen. So we've identified that there's great scope there for much more joined up working, which would benefit staff and communities alike. So the proposals within the report really just unpick that integrated approach about how we jointly work together to develop joint plans, how we work together to do community engagement, and how we have that common terminology of the use of localities and our priority neighbourhoods, which will create a much more simple landscape for our communities to be able to engage.
Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, people were very confused about what localities meant in two different contexts. So I think we can't underestimate the kind of commitment to partnership working that it's taken to get change in terminology, which often sounds like a small thing, but actually is a really big thing because it shows people are willing to cooperate and work together. And I'm very pleased to see it. Okay, thank you both very much. Over to the board. So I see Alison Murray first.
Thank you. Just, I think it's a great bit of work and it's very interesting to hear how you'll be engaging with the community. It was just a very minor point. In your neighbourhoods, for the south, you have a Cults, Fieldside and Mill Timber neighbourhood. It covers Countess Wells. I would have thought Countess Wells would need to be its own neighbourhood. They have quite a distinct brand new community developing there with, ultimately it's going to have two primaries and an academy of their own. It just seems that I'd have thought that would need to be identified rather than just brought into Cults, Mill Timber and Fieldside.
Michelle, is that one for you?
Yep, these neighbourhoods were identified some years ago based on, I think, a comprehensive piece of work to identify natural communities. So the neighbourhoods that are presented to you were agreed several years ago. Take your comments on board and I can certainly feed that back to the team. I think with any of these groupings there are communities within communities, and I think the strength of the work that we will be doing is to identify where there are particular issues that we need to work on with the community, regardless of recognised neighbourhood groupings or whether it's drilled down even further. So that is something that we would hope to be able to unpick with our locality plans and ensure that focus on the specific areas.
I mean, yes, that would explain it because Countess Wells didn't exist a few years ago, but I would say it is quite a distinct community now.
Certainly take that back to the team and we can consider that further.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. I suspect you might be about to get some backup from Councillor Cook, who's the councillor for the area. John?
Yes, completely agree with what Alison said. That actually wasn't what I was going to come in on. Excuse me. Just to say, I thought this was a really good paper. I think the direction of travel is absolutely right. Totally support it. Paper's very well written, very clear. Just a couple of points. It's on pages 93 to 96 of the pack where we've got the descriptions of what the various groups do. And I'm wondering if that could be something that could be shared with maybe a covering sheet with elected members, because I think that would help sort of generate unnecessary work. But I actually think that would be quite a helpful thing to do. Other point would be, can we develop a kind of job spec, a very simple job spec for what what an LEG member does. So it's kind of, if you turn up to a community council and somebody asks a question and they say, well, how much time is involved? What do I have to do? What skills do I need to have to do this? You know, half of it, a side of A4, I think, is, you know, it doesn't need to be War and Peace, certainly, but I just think maybe something that would be quite simple. Would that be possible, do you think?
Yeah, can I come in on that one? Yeah, just to say that's part of the upskilling, and I guess the work that we're doing with the legs. Through those discussions that actually arose from the people involved themselves. We're shying away from too formal a remit or a terms of reference or anything like that. But what we've said is we want to clarify expectations of each other, so that will help them understand what their role is, and also what they can expect in the way of support and help and assistance from us. But our aim here is that it's very much community led. So we're trying to encourage them to come forward with that. And as I say, we're still in the early stages of development. So in terms of time commitment, etc., we're not entirely sure what that would look like. And one of what they're telling us as well is that you know, it needs to be manageable, and they need to be able to dip in and out. We see them as quite fluid groups, that depending on the topic that's being considered, or the issue of the day, you know, the membership might actually change. Not, you know, everybody will still be a member, but you know, in terms of coming forward and being involved, it might be different groups at different times. So yeah, we're trying to keep it as flexible, and as I say, being led by them as we can.
Thanks. That's really helpful. And final question is on. There's reference in the paper to protected groups under the 2020 Qualities Act. So any thoughts on reaching out to hard to reach groups?
Yeah, we're actually currently working with our partners in GREC to give us advice on how best out. So we're looking at our protected characteristic makeup and working with them to help us identify the ways that we can reach out. I see Michelle wants to come in on that one as well.
Yep, just to say, you'll have noticed in the paper the role of the community engagement group in having a role in kind of coordinating activity across our legs and indeed our priority neighbourhood partnerships. Greg does have a place on that community engagement group, and I think actually it will just be a focus of that group going forward to make sure that we are engaging these hard to reach groups in our localities, and we're learning from how the legs are operating to identify any kind of change ideas or examples of best practice that would help us make sure that we're pulling all those groups in. So that's something that the community engagement group will continue to work with the legs on to have that focus.
Thanks, that's really helpful. And I say, just to reiterate, I thought it was a really good paper, and I was kind of reading through it and nodding and thinking, yeah, that looks right, that's good. So thank you.
Thank you for that, John. Luann, and then Kim, and then John Tomlinson, please.
Thanks. Just a couple of comments and then maybe a question if I can. Firstly, just to sort of note my appreciation of the work that the officers have done around the locality empowerment groups, which if I'm right, I think they were just about to go live with their community events back in February, March. All had to go online, and they've done great work in keeping that momentum and keeping the interest. So I'd just like to put on record our thanks and appreciation for how well they've adapted to go digital with the plans. Really great to see. I also really welcome this. I think it's right that we join up our consultation with community planning, people don't live single issue lives, and actually, you know, it just makes sense to do it this way, that public bodies join up in their consultations. And I suppose from an IJB, this isn't just a little thing, this is core to our strategic intent, that everything we do and everything we're designing in the future, we want it to be shaped by people in our communities, and we want to do that co-production approach. That's really, really important to us. So as I was thinking about it, I was thinking, well, what are the risks and what might happen that could be a problem? And I suppose one of the things I wonder about is there a risk that the people that have come forward almost have consultation fatigue? Because now we've widened the agenda that we're asking them about. How do we make sure that we're not swamping people with lots and lots of different consultations? But as an IJB, how do we make sure that the things we want to consult about are front and centre? So that's my question.
Thanks, Luann. And I think that's part of that adaptability and flexibility that I was talking about, so that we're, although the legs, the 3 legs are each in a group, distinct groups in themselves, within that there will be groups within the group, if you know what I mean, so that we'll be hoping to ensure that we can that we are consulting with different groups of people at different times, so it's not always the one group that we're coming back to. But again, as I say, we'll be very much led by the legs themselves in that regard. You know, that we'll be bringing forward to them potential areas of consultation, and you know, we'll be led by them as to how they want to go about that, who within their number would be involved, etc.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Thank you, Luann. Kim next, and then John Tomlinson, please.
Yeah, and thank you for the paper. It's very comprehensive and very easy to read. I wanted to ask about something on page 67 around the delivering stepped care approach, and specifically around hospital at home. I guess just bearing in mind that we're obviously already in winter and probably more of a pressurised winter phase this year. And it says just there's a recent focus to scale up capacity within the hospital at home team and also to create pathways. And I wondered, is there any assurance around whether these 2 things will be in place? Well, they're not, you know, pathways is more than one thing, in place for our winter period in order to cope with the demand that we feel is probably going to happen.
So hospital at home is just one element of our winter response, but we are working very hard at the minute to try and increase our capacity there. We're looking at additional professional roles and the number of people that we have in each of these roles, but it's very much one part of the jigsaw. So we're working the localities huddle, which is responsible for a lot of this work. They're ensuring that if there's a deficiency in one area, we're making up for it in another. So it's as I say, it's just part of the bigger picture.
You are on mute, Chair.
I know.
Still muted.
Thank you. It was going to happen at some point, wasn't it? Got John Tomlinson and then Philip Bell.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, very much welcome this report. I think it's a direction that it probably would have gravitated to, so it's really good to see it coming through at this point. I think it's a question of making sure this doesn't become a bureaucracy and does get quickly focused onto where it can make a difference. And I would say there are probably some learning from previous iterations of this, which can be looked at, and 2 points on that are around the use of data and having that early on so that it helps shape some of the conversations in the localities. avoids, single issues dominating there. So that's one issue. The other one, which is a bit more tricky, is influence on resources. And that should, I suggest, be tackled quite early on. I can speak to people if you're interested in exploring that further, but I do suggest that those are two important aspects in terms of the focus on making a difference. And my specific question is about, we were setting up the health and social care teams to be wrapped around the localities. So what's the thinking in terms of the structure here, in terms of multidisciplinary groupings and how they can have an influence across what is a wider group of services now?
Yes, we're looking at that multidisciplinary, meaning exactly that. We're just finalising the integrated wraparound locality, working, as you say, within the health and social care team, but we've already widened that out to discussions with our Aberdeen City Council colleagues in housing in particular initially, but that will go further. So absolutely, these legs will be considering all issues, and I would suggest that that multidisciplinary team will be an evolving feature. We've started on that journey, but we've got some way to go on it, and there will be no limits to the multidisciplinary aspect, basically, because that will involve all our community planning partners as well.
Okay, thank you. And the whole thrust of the health and social care moving from kind of unscheduled and scheduled care through to prevention and early intervention, it's been the kind of holy grail. But I think with this kind of structure, there is some way of getting some traction around that. So good luck with all of that.
Thank you, absolutely. And just to mention, in terms of the data that you referred to earlier on, we have actually had 2 sessions already with our legs around about data. We've taken at the minute that it is just health and social care partnership data, because we focused on the annual report, and we've split that data down by locality, and we've had a couple of sessions with them, but we will obviously be adding in data from the wider partners as well. So absolutely, data is where we start from in terms of the locality plans, and indeed feeding up into the LOIP, the refreshed LOIP, which will come into play next summer, and our own refreshed strategic plan when it's due the following April.
Thank you.
Philip, and then Angela Scott, please.
Thank you, Chair. Really just perhaps taking account of what John Tomlinson has just actually asked about influences on resources. And I'm thinking now about the South locality. So Torry is shown as having a high priority, and obviously these priority groupings are actually derived in terms of social deprivation, income, and health. But of course, between Cooter, Mill Timber, Fieldside, and Cults, there's a very high percentage of older folk who have, in many cases, lower income, and in many cases, poor health. So I'm just wondering whether this influence on resources would actually, how that is influenced. Is that a function of the community engagement group? And how is that driven? That's my question.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of the crux of the matter, isn't it? And I think who's available. I've got a view on that, but I'm not going to express it. It's not my place.
I just wondered if Michelle wanted to pick up on anything there.
I mean, the function of the locality engagement groups, empowerment groups rather, sorry, is to to feed into our priorities as a partnership and as individual partners in those areas that we need to take a collaborative approach to improving outcomes. So that is the purpose of those locality empowerment groups, and of course to engage communities in how we tackle those priorities together. I think the question of resources would naturally unfold from the development of the locality plans themselves and how those plans are going to be resourced jointly by partners to deliver the various improvement activities and projects that are required to be taken forward to achieve those priority aims. So I think that would be the opener for the resource question about how we'll collectively contribute to the delivery of those plans together.
Okay, thanks.
In a world of unlimited resources, it wouldn't be so difficult, would it? And so the locality empowerment groups are a way for us to have that discussion with communities, and for each community to see itself in relation to other ones, I think. So to raise awareness and understanding of the variances and the reasons for that across the city. So people accept then some of the resource allocations that are made. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I think I was really just, sorry, Chair, what I was really sort of driving at was rather than saying, okay, so we've got priority groups, we have to actually look at spreading those resources, thinly or whatever, but they've got to be, it's got to be horses for courses, doesn't it?
Yeah, and there's got to be acceptance of the decisions that are made as well. And I see the locality empowerment groups as a vehicle for doing that, because I think there's to be careful what I say here, but there's a kind of understanding that areas of multiplication like Torry need additional resource to try and even out, to try and reduce some of the inequalities that those areas face. But I think that can be difficult for people who don't have lots of connection with places like Torry to understand. And I would hope that the locality empowerment groups would enable a proper conversation, a proper well-informed conversation based on the data, as well as people's lived experiences. So we have an acceptance of that, those rules that we use to allocate scarce resources at the moment. But it is challenging. It is really challenging to do this. Okay.
Thanks.
Chair, could I add to that?
Yeah.
Just really to supplement, I absolutely agree with what you're saying, and it is absolutely about how we align that resources. I think the fact that the LOIP will be up for refresh come the summer this year, and we will then be starting to look at our the strategic plan, which will obviously feed from the LOIP, but we'll also, with all the data and the engagement that's leading up to that, we're looking for a much more co-produced strategic plan. So that will be where you're absolutely right about difficult decisions about resourcing, particularly from a partnership point of view, but how are we going to use those resources to meet our strategic aims, which will ultimately reach the LOIP. But it's about engaging with those locality empowerment groups now to have that as a very much a co-produced and looking at inequalities. So hopefully that, Councillor Bell's helpful.
Yeah. And also about tapping into the resources that communities have. It's not necessarily about paid resource and paid staff. There's an awful lot of self-help work and peer support, community support, and we've seen it in COVID. There's been some amazing community activity going on that's kind of sprung up organically in a lot of cases that actually the locality empowerment groups can help us access as well. Okay, Angela, sorry, over to you. We've delayed you a bit. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. I just wanted to go back to John's points and of course remembering that John was heavily instrumental and played a really strong part in the city's previous approach to localities, and we just ask that John lean into the team behind the scenes to make sure we all get from that experience when John was on the executive side. He also raised a kind of number of points that I just wanted to come back on, and of course, quite right, there's the journey of the CPP, there's been the journey of the IGB, and now we're coming together. But probably important to just say that we don't start from a position of zero. the locality plans that the CPP has had in place to date have been completely informed by data. And John, there's no shortage of analysis of all of that. And of course, at that time, that also included the analysis of health outcomes for those priority areas. I think the journey that we're now on is to make sure that as we get behind all of the localities, that we do that entirely through the lens of data, both in terms of the health and care outcomes, but as well as all the other outcomes that we're striving for in the LOIP. So again, I think we're getting the benefit of bringing it all together. To give you some comfort as well, John, this paper is also going to the CPP board, which Councillor Duncan represents the IGB on. So this paper is going to the CPP board for the board to agree. It came through the CPP management group, and I asked the very question that you asked yourself, that this wasn't just about multidisciplinary engagement within the categories of NHS, but it was also about multidisciplinary across the entirety of the CPP partnership, and all partners who are represented in the management group have all signed up to progressing on the locality model. So I think that's incredibly positive. And the final point is just to build on the point that you raised, John, in relation to prevention. Every time we've done the refresh of the LOIP, we've invited the Director of Public Health, who's supported by Michelle and other colleagues in the Council's CPP team, to do an assessment about the balance of prevention versus reaction in the LOIP. And we go through every single project there to determine whether it's on the preventative scale or whether it's on the downstream. So we're really focused about making sure that the LOIP and its refresh and the locality plans put, if not more attention on prevention rather than the kind of downstream, because that's ultimately we want to get ahead. So again, more than happy to share that, and you will be a part of the process on the LOIP refresh. But again, I'm happy to bring evidence back to prove that in the refresh of the LOIP that we've got that attention on prevention. But you'll play a key part in all of that, Councillor Duncan. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, I think this way of working, this truly joined up partnership working, unlocks a heap of potential, both for paid staff and for people in our communities. And I think it's really important that we're simplifying the landscape here and we're clarifying the terminology that's used, because the terminology is often a real barrier for people. So I, like everyone else who's commented, I really welcome this paper, and I'll be welcoming it again at community planning in a couple of days' time when I attend that meeting. I have one final question. When we discussed this a year ago, we were lobbied very hard by people who were previously on the locality leadership groups for the Health and Social Care Partnership, who had a lot of concerns about the work that they had done just being ignored and not taken forward. Do we have an update on whether those people are still involved, whether they're what the approach has been to taking forward and building on the work that the LLGs did through the locality empowerment groups?
Yes, Chair. These some, not all. I would say probably most of these people are still involved, and their voices are being heard at the legs in terms of don't let's lose the experience and learning that we had previously. Let's ensure that we bring that forward into the learning for the development of the current legs. So yeah, absolutely, that learning will not be lost, and there are people around who will make sure that that's not.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that, because we made a commitment to them a year ago that they would continue to be included and involved. So I'm glad to hear that's the case. Okay, I've got a recommendation on page 63. So we're asked to note the progress of the development of effective locality working, and we're endorsing the proposed integration of locality planning and community empowerment models as described in the Community Planning Aberdeen paper at Appendix A. So we're content to do that? Good, thank you. Thank you very much, Michelle, for coming along today. It's good to see you at the meeting. And thank you both, Michelle and Alison, for all your work on this over the last year. It's a very encouraging very encouraging piece of work. Right. I'm mindful of the time that we've been going for an hour and a half, and also the need that people have expressed in the past to have a break in longer meetings. I think today is going to be quite a long meeting. So what I propose to do is we'll take the mental health delivery plan annual report, and then we'll have a 5-minute comfort break before we come back to item 12, which is the 2C remodelling report, if that's okay. Just to give people a quick comfort break before we get into 2C. Okay, so mental health delivery plan, item 11. Who's introducing this?
That'll be myself, Chair. Kevin.
Hello, Kevin.
Good morning.
Morning.
This is the first update of the 3-year plan that was approved by the board in March. And of course, it's co-produced over a period of time last year with the partners that are outlined in the report, but especially our third sector, police and other colleagues. Of course, almost days after it was approved by the board, we went into COVID response. And I've got to be honest with the board, myself and others were for remit for this plan were a bit apprehensive when we realised the first report was due today. But actually, we've been quite reassured and pleasantly surprised that actually COVID response has actually helped us move on more actions than we anticipated, particularly around about digital response and know who to turn to for helping people with mental health and wellbeing. And so the Appendix 1 kind of summarises the 15 key objectives, and then its usual traffic lights. There are a couple of things on pause, but they're restarted now because, as folk will know, we do have an instruction to remobilise everything around about mental health and wellbeing now. I suppose it would be remiss of me not to sort of highlight that COVID, although it's brought an opportunity and we've progressed things, has also brought an increased demand on all bits of the system and service. And it's well publicised, as national reports, we're picking it up locally at all levels of service. And primary care colleagues and the link workers, I was meeting with them last week, we know that there's an increasing demand. So the report's relatively flexible. So that's why we took something last month round about the care workers under Action 15, because in many ways, that's one of the first lines of support to people needing help for mental health and wellbeing. And also it protects the capacity in the other levels of service provision. So I don't know if we know it's increasing, and it always increases over in the winter months anyway. And it's we just have to look at the media stories. It looks like employment's going to start being an issue, and that will increase need. But we think we've got arrangements in place that can cope with that, and we'll keep modifying it. The plan will be reviewed by the Mental Health Partnership Group, which is a co-production group. So there's a bit of flexibility. We can respond to the increasing need that's happening there. I don't think I have to say much more in the introduction around about that.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Yes, you were one of the first kind of casualties of COVID, weren't you? Progressing your plan. It was just bad timing, really. Okay, open to the board for questions and comments on this paper. Luann.
Thanks, and really welcome this report. And as you say, Kevin, there's been opportunities that have presented due to COVID that are positive. A couple of questions from me. First one, well, just to say I really welcome the third sector involvement and that work with the third sector to develop what they can offer. I think that's a really sensible thing to do. I wonder, first question is just, how are the views of people with lived experience being heard at the moment around mental health services?
Well, we are relying on the feedback that people are giving us through the various networks and user groups. It is, we're not getting that same first-hand sort of face-to-face contact, which was always invaluable around about mental health services, because although a lot of people are happy to engage one-to-one in their clinical intervention round about with digital or near me
sort of contact, getting that kind of feedback is a bit tricky. So I would say we're not doing as well as we would be liking to do on that just now. But Caroline can probably say a bit more. She's in our team.
Caroline, would you like to come in? Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I suppose with the development of the mental health and wellbeing practitioners and that service, we're going to have developed peer support workers within that project, and they will also link into the legs. So I guess that will also support us with looking at the wraparound care model, which Alison spoke to earlier on, and also tapping into our wellbeing resources and groups within the locality, but also support us really there with getting more detail around people with lived experience and supporting the development of that role. So it will be a flexible role that will be developed in conjunction with people as part of the legs.
Okay, thanks, Caroline, Kevin. And my second question is just for clarity, really. On page 114, it talks about embedding a human rights-based approach across mental health services, and the action around that is the new 9 mental health posts and all the peer support, which Caroline's just touched on. But I'm just looking for assurance that a mental health, a human rights approach should be embedded across all our mental health services through things like access to advocacy services and stuff. So I'm just wanting to check that that is the case, and this isn't seen as this is how we're going to do human rights in mental health services, if you understand what I mean.
No, just to reassure folk, it is how we do it, but I suppose the terminology that's probably been used up until now is person-centred, round about the individual and their needs. I guess that's the kind of national directive that the Mental Health Act and everything's got to be more focused on a human rights sort of approach rather than I think it's just a change in terminology. In practice, we'll do the same thing. We always look at the person and we're always going to respect their human rights. But I suppose it's just a change in emphasis that's coming from the likes of the Mental Welfare Commission and the new legislation that's going to come out round about in particular learning disability and autism people with mental health conditions. So we've always looked after people's human rights. But that's the terminology that's used in the national report. So the national strategy, sorry.
Okay, thanks. It's more a shift in language that's being used as opposed to this is a brand new thing, and yeah, that's what I would have expected, and it's certainly something as an IGB we'll be interested to hear about how that human rights approach is embedded across all our services. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Luann. John Cook and then Shona, please.
Thanks. It was just a brief comment to say the fact that you've made more progress than you thought you were going to. I just wanted to congratulate everybody and say well done to all concerned. That was it. No questions.
That's good to hear. Thank you, John. Shona and then Alan Gray. No, yes, Shona, I think. Just Shona.
Hi there. Yes, my question was just on with regards to Luann and her question about the human rights angle. And that's obviously we've heard about legs and the input there, but from the carers' perspective and the Carers Act, obviously, how do you address the balance between the individual and their human rights? And obviously, if there's any additional input from the carer and how much of that will be taken on board? Thank you.
Okay, now that's always a very tricky thing to do and get right in mental health, because I suppose traditionally clinicians have had the confidentiality of their patient, and if the patient or the individual isn't willing to share information with their carer, it can be challenging. But I think every effort's always made to try and involve folks' carers, and certainly we have other, in the city we do have forums with carers groups around about mental health and well-being, where we're able to get their views, and that gives folk an opportunity to highlight general things. And we would always take on board an individual carer's concerns. We can sometimes be restricted by the legislation and how much information we can divulge. If I'm really open and honest about that, that is difficult for us as a service as it is for the carers. But we always do our best to communicate as much and as openly as we possibly can without breaching the patient's right to, or the individual's right to keep their own confidentiality about their condition or whatever the situation is. Does that reassure?
Yeah, well, I think just in certain circumstances, if a carer did have an individual concern about somebody, then, you know, it would be good to be heard. I'm aware in certain situations that carers are not heard, you know, if the individual has said, and I think there's a little bit of confusion about, you know, I understand the confidentiality regarding patient care, but there has to be struck a balance, I think, between carer input and confidentiality, because 9 times out of 10, the carer does not wish to know what the private communication is between the clinician and the patient. They just want to be heard and have an input into their care because they are perhaps picking up on things that the patient is not recognising or doesn't think is important, but could be a big warning sign to the clinician that perhaps they're not as well as they think they are. That's the only thing I would say about that.
Yeah, I totally agree. Nobody knows the person better usually than the family and the carer. And I think, you know, we always try to be constructive about how we do that. We can use advocacy. There's opportunities for people to be heard, but I understand that on occasions it can be frustrating for individual carers to be able to sort of participate in an individual's care. But we can look at the arrangements we've got in the city and try and make that clearer for folk, because I think that is one of our things, one of our key actions is about involving and supporting carers. So we would be picking up under that action.
So the
Caroline's got something, sorry.
All right.
Sorry, just on that point, just before COVID, there was a shared learning event held with our clinicians looking at confidentiality and carers and really highlighting the information that carers can input into care. So it was more about shared learning around confidentiality and the times that clinicians should be listening. So there was an event earlier on this year, but I guess with COVID, that probably needs to be reiterated. Thank you.
Okay. I just wanted to ask, so the mental health partnership group that you mentioned at the beginning, Kevin, your, you know, the kind of service user input, does that have carer reps on it?
Yes. Caroline?
We've got ACVO. I'm not sure if we have an actual carer rep on the group.
Okay. Is that something that you could perhaps consider, perhaps in discussion with our carer reps on this board? Just take that forward, because it sounds like it's an area for some significant carer input that might help allay concerns that carers have, but also improve the service that you're delivering as well. So.
Yeah, we can definitely look at that. I mean, we should be involving our carers round about the partnership group.
I think we had VSA on the group, Kevin, but I think with the change of contract, we'll need to look at new reps on the group. Yeah.
Okay.
How about we set something up with the carers on the board, Chair, and you know, maybe identify the best ways of getting carer involvement, and because there'll be options, and we probably want to do more than one, I would think. So I'd be happy to take that on board.
Yeah, that would be great. I think Alison McLeod is the kind of main contact person for the carers and to take forward our interface with carers. So we'll leave you all to work that out. Are you content with that, Shona and Alison Murray? Are you happy with that way forward?
Yes, I'm more than happy with that, Shona here. So I'm very pleased to hear that. That would certainly be a very positive way forward, I feel.
I agree.
Okay, great. Thank you. We'll leave you to take that forward, and I'm sure we'll hear back next year's annual report about how you're getting on that one. Right, I don't see any other hands up for questions on this, so let's go back to recommendations. I think I'd like to echo Councillor Cook's comments. I think given the exceptional circumstances that you've been in this year, then you've made remarkable progress on your action plan, given COVID. So we're asked to note the progress, and we're noting the Action 15 spend and the new service commitments that are set out in Appendix 6. So we're happy to do that, and we look forward to another report from you next year. Thank you. Okay, I think, as I said before that item, I think we'll just take a quick 5-minute comfort break. I've got buzzers and all sorts of things going off in my ears at the moment. I need to go and sort them out. So it's 11:40, so if we could be back at 11:45, and we'll take item 12, the next item, which is the 2C remodelling. Okay. Okay, I make that 11:45. Is everybody back and available?
Yep.
Great. Okay, we're on item 12C, which is the 2C remodelling business case. So I think Chief Officer is going to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. Yep. Members, before you today, you have a detailed report which looks at the options for remodelling the 6 practices in the city which are currently managed by Aberdeen City Health and Social Care Partnership on behalf of NHS Grampian, generally known as 2C practices. You will be very aware from some of the media coverage this week that the proposals in the report have caused some anxieties amongst patients, the GP practice teams involved and the staff side trade unions. This is entirely understandable given that the changes proposed are potentially quite far-reaching and that change is always unsettling for both staff and our clients. But what I have to say here just at the outset so we're clear is that this is by no means change for change's sake. We embarked upon this remodelling with a clear purpose, and that purpose is to improve and enhance our GP services in the city. It is certainly not about reducing or removing services. It's about making them more robust and more sustainable so that they are fit to meet the future needs as demand increases and becomes more complex and resources become tighter. Aberdeen and indeed the rest of Scotland and the UK have to future-proof our primary care services to respond to increasing demographic and workforce challenges. And so the report before you today recommends that we begin a procurement process to identify GP partners who would operate these 6 practices as an independent business and work with all staff to deliver improvements and innovations. Most practices in Aberdeen City and across Scotland are managed like this as independent businesses by GP partners. This independent contractor model, you will know, is the one favoured nationally in the new General Medical Services GMS contract and locally by our local medical committee, the LMC. It has, in fact, been the standard model for delivering general practice since the birth of the NHS more than 70 years ago. It is nothing at all to do with privatisation. A successful procurement process would result in a revitalised set of practices operating under the independent contractor model, but it would still very much be part of our public sector delivery, receiving public funding for the service it delivers and very much at the heart of our public service ethos. Any tender which fails to deliver on this would not be acceptable, not to the partnership, not to NHS Grampian, and nor, I am sure, to the IJB. And I hope that the people will take this as a cast iron reassurance from me that our proposals are put forward very much with the interests of our patients and our staff at our heart. The proposed remodelling aims to improve the sustainability of our GP practices, both the current 2Cs and the other city practices, to ensure that continued provision of safe, sustainable and person-centred care for patients. This report follows several months of engagement with the GP practices concerned and with the wider primary care community in Aberdeen. The staff engagement, which began in midsummer, has involved workshops, briefings, evaluation of the feedback and ideas from staff, and many further meetings and staff discussion groups right through to last month. It's important to say that full staff engagement is planned to continue if the Aberdeen IJB agrees that the report's recommendation today. If the IJB approves the recommendations, patients will not see any immediate large-scale changes at their GP practice. But in the longer term, the remodelling aims to help ensure that the continued provision of excellent care for patients across Aberdeen so that they can see the right person in the right place at the right time from practice teams. In short, the remodelling aims to create a far more flexible service which can adapt in an agile way to changing patient needs. The remodelling sits alongside other extensive work locally in primary care to provide additional services and create multidisciplinary teams. This is designed to encourage better collaboration and much more cross-system working to ease the pressures on GPs, allowing them to focus in their roles as expert medical generalists in Aberdeen's Primary Care Improvement Plan and GMS contract. The partnership also firmly believes that a procurement process involving all of the 6 practices would invite innovative business cases which could stimulate new possibilities for service delivery. This would in turn open up more innovation and collaboration between practices, greater flexibility to benefit patients, and trigger further opportunities for staff and development and leadership. The smaller practices could be supported by larger GP practices through shared resource and additional support. And the Health and Social Care Partnership, with having slightly less responsibility for direct operational management, would thereby increase its capacity to help support and deliver in the overall primary care improvement plan for the whole of Aberdeen. No one is claiming it will be simple and straightforward. Change never is, but with the will and determination to succeed, we can create a far more robust and mutually supportive GP practice network here in Aberdeen, which will give everyone benefit. I'd like to hand over to Lorraine McKenna now, who will continue to take you through the report. Thank you.
Thank you,
Chair
Lorraine.
and Sandra. Thank you, Chair and Sandra. Following on from what Sandra said, the business case is very detailed, as you can see, so I'm not going to go through the report in its entirety, but just to provide some context, I'll give you a short summary of the different contract types for the delivery of general medical services in Scotland. A 2C contract is where the practices, including staff, are managed by the partnership. The 17J contract is a practice that is run under a nationally negotiated contract and often referred to as an independent contractor model. And then there is the 17C contract, which is an independent practice that has a locally negotiated agreement. In Aberdeen, 21% of practices are 2C compared to 4.1% nationally. In addition to the drivers for change that Sandra has outlined, the need to change how services are delivered in the city is also driven by the increasing demand on services, compounded by an increasing older population and increasing comorbidities. Over the last 4 years, 4 GP practices have terminated their contracts with NHS Grampian. 2 are now under the management of the partnership with a 2C contract. One closed their patient list. One closed and their patient list was absorbed by other practices, and one went through a successful procurement process and is now part of an independent contractor model. A sustainability study carried out by GP practices in 2019 shows that 23 of the 28 practices in the city consider themselves at high risk in terms of sustainability. The new GMS contract, which was nationally agreed in 2018, paved the way for the Primary Care Improvement Plan, which is one of the key ways the partnership is working towards improving sustainability in general practice in Aberdeen by encouraging cross-system, multidisciplinary working and better collaboration. And given the challenges that Aberdeen City Health and Social Care Partnership Aberdeen City Health and Social Care Partnership needs to begin the journey of change to ensure that there are local services across the city that ensure primary care can continue to deliver safe, sustainable, person-centred care in light of the increasing demands. As Sandra has outlined, staff have been involved with this process from the beginning. Workshops were planned and delivered by a multidisciplinary project team, including representatives from primary care, the local medical committee, GP subcommittee of NHS Grampian's area medical committee, staff side representatives and HR. Staff feedback from the first 2 workshops was fed into subsequent workshops. Staff were encouraged to feedback using a number of mechanisms during and after the workshops. And on behalf of the staff side representatives informed us that some staff groups did not feel they had been heard over other groups. Therefore, practice-specific mini-workshops were organised with each of the 2C practices to enable staff to input further and to have any additional queries they had answered. Since the workshop, a group of 2C practice staff have come together to create an internal proposal, and this was supported by the partnership, and this has been included in the business case. We have received a number of concerns and complaints about the remodelling process to date, and these have been addressed as they have been received. Practice-specific meetings have been held with staff, and HR have met with those staff groupings that had concerns about their terms and conditions changing. The business case outlines the options considered for undertaking a remodelling of 2C practices, and they are to do nothing or to do the minimum, a partial merger of 2C practices, a full merger of 2C practices, partial merger and partial procurement process, full procurement process, and the additional option developed by 2C practice staff. The options appraisal in the business case indicates that the recommended option is option 5, which is to undertake a full procurement process. Not only did this option score highest against the criteria, it was also evaluated against the IJB Strategic Risk Register, which showed that it would have a positive impact on 5 of the 6 relevant risks in the risk register. Should the IJB decide to approve the recommendation, ongoing improvement work will continue in practices during the procurement process, and a workshop will be held to provide the information required to give suitably qualified persons the tools to submit a business case as part of the procurement process, should they wish to do so. Should the IJB decide to approve the recommendation, it will be the first step in a journey to help ensure that Aberdeen's primary care services are sustainable and ready to adapt to the challenges that the future holds. Therefore, the business case recommends that the Integration Joint Board A, endorses, approves and gives agreement to proceed with implementation for the preferred option outlined in paragraph 3.7 to enable the remodelling of 2C GP practices. And B, notes the intended procurement process to implement the preferred option, if approved, as at Appendix B, C and D, to be delivered in conjunction with ongoing internal development with the 2C practices supported by Aberdeen City Health and Social Care Partnership. C, that it makes the direction as attached at Appendix E and instructs the Chief Officer to issue direction to NHS Grampian. And D, requests that an update on the outcomes of the procurement process is brought back to the IJB in spring 2021. That's all I have to say, Chair, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Sandra and Lorraine. I noticed that we have Ian Small in the meeting. I think, Ian, you're the lead for primary care for NHS Grampian. Is there anything that you wish to say at this juncture, or are you happy just to come in and answer questions if they're asked?
I'm happy to do so, Chair. I'm the Associate Medical Director, so I'm here in that role. That's more a professional and advisory role than it would be as a decision-making role. So I'm happy to observe in the meantime and comment where you or others might think it relevant or necessary.
Okay, thank you, Ian, just to clarify your involvement, and thank you for coming along today. Okay, over to the board. So now for questions and comments on the proposal. So I see Mike Adams first and then John Cook.
Thanks, Chair. And this is mere comment and statement, and some of it has already been said and covered, but in the role that is done by partnership, then I need to highlight a couple of bits, although, as I say, Sandra and Lorraine have actually mentioned some. So the start or near the beginning of this consultation process, a group of staff did highlight the fact that they felt that they were being overshadowed by another particular group of staff and they felt left out and not involved. I highlighted this at the City SLT and to Lorraine, and that was taken on board and it was rectified by mere communication sessions and workshops for the agreed set of staff. Escalated concerns last week by a particular organisation union were raised at Beth Aberdeen Trade Council and ultimately ended up in media. The concerns are on the process and 2P in general, which, as any trade unionist will tell you, is always a particular issue. As I say, this has been, it is an escalated concern by this organisation. It is as much as it has been highlighted to me at this moment in time, and therefore it was always going to be that I would mark this statement here, just so that you can, the board can take into consideration that the staff side position from those involved is very much against only kind of 2P. Yeah, that is it.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Actually, having heard Mike's comments, I'm going to make a declaration of interest here. I am employed by Unison, which is one of the recognised staff trade unions, but I have had no involvement from a Unison perspective in this issue at all. And I don't feel, therefore, that the nature of my interest requires me to leave this meeting. But I feel that it's important for me to put that on the record just now, because particular staff side concerns have been raised here. Could I have some comments from officers, particularly on the TUPE aspect and on the, so we've had an acknowledgement from Mike, if I'm hearing him correctly, that the initial concerns that were raised were addressed with additional workshop sessions and engagement. Mike's nodding, but that staff side still have concerns about TUPE and about the implications of that if the preferred option is taken forward. So could I have some comment back from officers about that issue?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, in relation to TUPE, the concerns that staff raised during and after the workshop processes were taken on board, and we arranged for staff who requested it to meet with HR, and there were a number of meetings held. We have Karen Innes from HR on the call with us today as well. So if there are any specific questions with regard to TUPE, then Karen would be able to address those.
Okay. Mike, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, just on, and I mean, I appreciate that, Lorraine, and it gives a clearer idea for board members. But actually, only discussions on TUPE, because of previous experience for almost any trade unionist, will tell you that yeah, it's never something that we would support. Just because of how it can work. We have all done several before, including myself, including we GP practices. Yeah, they're near the best of things anyway. So there is that bit about it. Can I just say as well, Sarah, just to make it very clear for people that although there have been staff side in this and there have been partnership involved, I was not involved for the simple reason that in quite a lot of things that will come up in the city, because I sit on this board, even as a non-voting member, then I will take no part in that, because I would then see that as a conflict of interest. So with this bit, I am putting forward other organisations' thoughts, because that way I can be non-partisan.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's noted and understood, Mike. Okay, I see John Cook and then John Tomlinson.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it was very helpful that it might clear up some of the confusion that Senator MacLeod explained, that partnerships of GPs has been the norm since day one of the NHS. It's the main model across Scotland. Actually, it's the main model south of the border as well. And therefore, if we did go through the procurement process and the successful bidder was a GP partnership, that would not be privatisation. So I think that's quite a helpful clarification. However, if we do go out to a procurement process, as I understand it, there is nothing to stop, and we couldn't legally stop a private sector healthcare firm bidding. On page 149 of the pack, when it talks about risk, it says there is a risk of a legal challenge regarding the outcomes of the procurement process. Now, I can't imagine a GP practice would legally challenge the outcomes of the procurement process, because they wouldn't have the time, the inclination, or the money to do it. But a potentially unsuccessful private sector firm that bid and didn't get the contract could challenge us. And if they did challenge, there's therefore a risk that we would end up having to pay compensation to a private sector firm that was unsuccessful in the process. Can officers confirm that my understanding of that is correct?
I think that Alec would probably be better answering that question,
yeah,
as Councillor Cook.
My understanding is that is correct. I mean, you know, and I guess what we need to be careful about is trying to prejudge what would happen through a tender process in terms of how I, you know, put across my remarks in this regard that there is a risk, and you know, that risk applies to any procurement process that we go through around about a potential challenge coming in afterwards, and that's something that, you know, the process that we put in place should allow us to protect against that. I guess what I would highlight in relation to the specific comment is that you know, we've got the criteria there in terms of how we're evaluating the bid, and you know, as I refer back to the opening comments from Lorraine, we wouldn't award the contract if we didn't think it was you know, it wasn't compliant with the criteria it was there, or it wasn't within the best interest of what we were trying to achieve. So there is a risk around there. It's highlighted there. I don't think there's anything that we can really do to minimise against that less risk, because then we would end up potentially going against what the procurement process would be. But we do have protections in place around about the procurement process, and also thinking about that we always have the ability not to award a contract if we don't think it's right to do so.
So let's say we go through the procurement process. There are some bidders. One of them is a private sector healthcare firm. We don't think that they're the best option. We think a bunch of a GP partnership, 17J GP partnership is the best. There is still, nonetheless, I know none of us have got crystal balls, so this is difficult. Before we awarded the contract, it would have to come back to the IJB for the IJB to say yay or nay. And one option would be we award the contract and there is a risk of a legal challenge from a private sector healthcare firm. And we then have the option to decide whether to proceed with awarding the contract, knowing that there is that risk, but feeling that the risk is small, or we also have the option of not awarding the contract to anybody, which would then eliminate the risk of a legal challenge. Yeah.
I think you were correct. Yeah, I mean, I think that's you know, largely potentially what could happen. But I would say that there wasn't you know, there wasn't an intention to come back to the IJB with the actual tender. Once the tender was you know, once you've agreed to that situation, or if you've agreed to the recommendation, then that would then lie within officers' delegations around about who made the decisions. But as I say, we have to work our way through the procurement process, do the due diligence around about that, and score the options. And if once these options are scored, then it moves into that sort of award, and then the standstill period and all that sort of stuff that comes along from there. So there is a risk around about you know, of a legal challenge, and as I said earlier, that would apply to any process. But in terms of how the process is outlined just now, there wouldn't be an intention to come back.
If there's no intention to come back, do we have the option to bring it back?
To be honest, I don't think legally that would be the recommended route, because the tender process means it has to be evaluated according to the criteria that are set out in the exempt appendices that we could discuss at the end of this meeting if people wish to do that. But taking it back for the IJB to make a final decision would risk upsetting the evaluation that had been done by officers on the legally robust tender process. So we are making the decision today and then delegating authority to our officers to assess any bids that come in with the iterative process, the discussion and interview process that's described in the exempt appendices. We're delegating the authority to them to then make the decision, and we will receive obviously a report back on the outcome of that process. And then we have an ongoing role to monitor performance of primary care as a whole in the city. But I don't think there's any procurement process conducted by a public authority where the final decision sits with a board such as this. I see Angela's wanting to come in, so she can probably clarify that. Angela, do you want to come in?
Councillor Duncan, it was Angela was just asking whether or not legal, could come in. So just really to reiterate what you've said, that actually the recommendation, if it's approved, is to make the direction to NHS Grampian to almost go ahead and carry on and deliver the services, and part of that is the procurement process, very similar to what we do with Aberdeen City Council. When we issue them a direction, it goes into their governance setup, and that includes the procurement process. So it wouldn't ordinarily come back to the IGB for a decision about a procurement matter.
Sarah, I see Alistair Jameson had put something in the chat. I don't know if that helps. I don't know if you've seen that.
Yes, Alistair's comment is about the Scottish Government's attitude. So Scottish Government does not support private sector primary care provision, which is true. It doesn't stop somebody bidding though. And that's why we have to have a robust bid and evaluation process. Speaking as a former lawyer, I think it would increase the legal jeopardy if the final decision came back to a board where we weren't assessing any bids against evaluation criteria. So I wouldn't be supporting anything that required the board then to make the final decision on this procurement process.
John. Thanks for that clarification. I've got a bunch of other questions, but they're on different themes, so maybe.
Okay. Is there anybody else
who want to come in?
Is there anybody else who wants to speak on this particular aspect of the bid process and legal risk? Just shout out now, since I've got hands up already.
Hi.
Yes, Sandra.
Cheers. Yeah, just to say that just mindful of the advice, the legal advice, and the issues that are here, that it is once if the recommendation is approved, that's a process. But assuming that we can keep the board and will keep the board updated of progress and how we're moving forward, and happy to pull any interim, the board together to have some discussions about how progress has been made, if that would be helpful.
Yes, I think we would certainly appreciate regular updates, and one of the recommendations is to come back to us in the spring, and I think we would want that. So yes, Mr. Small, you want to come in?
Just on the back of Councillor Cook's question and Alistair Jameson's comment, practices that have found themselves in a vacant position across Scotland have in the past gone through a procurement process. Whilst an external body such as an existing practice which has GPs within it would relatively straightforwardly be able to put in a bid against that procurement process because they were GPs, a private company would find that very difficult to do, and in fact it's my understanding that they have in the past been unsuccessful, which is where Alistair's comment comes in from. As you say, it doesn't mean they couldn't challenge, but in terms of who would best fit the criteria of a bid in order to contract to provide GP services, you have to be a GP.
Okay. So there's an additional barrier in the way of say a private equity company wanting to take over these services. That's helpful. Thank you very much, Mr. Small. John, I don't see any other hands up. I see people helpfully took their hands down. I'm happy for you to start putting them up again for new questions. Leslie, is this on the legal issue or something different?
It's on something different.
Okay, so I think there were other people who previously had their hands up, so we'll come back to you. So, John, do you have your other questions? We'll just rattle through them just now.
Yeah, a couple of things. In the business case, it states that the part of the rationale for procurement model is that it's the preferred and standard model in the 2018 GMS contract. But the GMS contract also allows for 2C, I think the phrase is, in a wide range of circumstances. So could officers comment on that? Because it doesn't seem to be, to me, to be a compelling reason to go down this route just because it's the norm because the 2C model is allowed as well.
Who would like to answer that question? Emma King, you go.
Hello. So yes, the GMS contract of 2018, whilst it states the independent contract model is the preferred model, it also states, and specifically in 2004, that there is a 2C, and they do support 2C practices as well. And they do have a legitimate and very important part to play with serving our population, specifically and more commonly related to those practices that would struggle to be an independent practice, whether that be due to a practice population or due to recruitment. They are usually 2C models in areas of either small groupings or higher areas of deprivation. It is not the norm. Doesn't mean that normal's not right, as it were, but to have a practice that doesn't fit those areas to keep in a 2C model rather than transition to an independent contractor model.
Thanks for that. One of the other benefits of the proposal is said to be that we can get more online and near me consultations done. Couldn't we do that regardless of the model that we use?
Sorry, Chair. I'm struggling with my videos and my sounds here just at the moment. Yes, sorry, your question's gone completely out of my head, Councillor Cook. I apologise. Sorry, the digital solutions. Thank you. That's okay. Struggling with digital, obviously, and the digital solutions is the question. So, yes, there obviously with COVID, we have been thrust into using the digital solutions, which has been really good in that it has allowed us to see patients through digital means and reduce the footfall into practices to make sure that they're safe. But there are other virtual means of seeing patients, if I can use that word, and seeing, in that there are different asynchronous types of consulting, which they're called, which are basically where patients would use IT to register their whatever the problem is, and that would be done via email, and therefore it would be triaged the following day. So there are other virtual mechanisms that are not currently being used in our 2C practices that we would like to see increasing, the use of those increasing.
Thanks. I'm glad I'm glad I'm not the only one who forgets a question because you're trying to struggle with your IT at the same time. And then I've got a bunch of questions which are probably better handled in the private session. But the final point for at this point would be we went out to consultation, and the model that's being proposed is the one that was the least favourite when the consultation results came back. And I've seen in a business context, in other organisations, you have a system, you have a model that looks great on paper, and in theory it should be the best. But if the people who are supposed to implement it don't buy into it, don't understand it, it probably isn't going to work. So you also see it in a football context, successful football manager comes from one club to another, tries to play the same system that he's played in the past. The players don't buy in, and it all goes horribly wrong. I think Jose Mourinho at Manchester United. Can officers comment on why we've gone for a model that basically doesn't seem to have the support of the staff who are going to work it?
So if I could come in there. So we have, and I will see within the business case, a service delivery model that the staff have put forward. So a large proportionality of the staff are in favour of evolving the way the services are delivered within 2C practices. However, there are a large proportion of staff that are very concerned about T's and C's, and if they transfer to an independent practice, that their T's and C's will be impacted. So I think we need to be very sort of mindful of why there are differing reasons as to why staff are not in favour of the option that we're recommending today. And it's not that all staff do not disagree with the need to change the service delivery model. It's more concerns about the potential impact should a tender be awarded and their T's and C's change, which is a different issue to our preferred option of encouraging an environment where we can look at strategic change across all of our city practices and provide stimulation of the local market and opportunity for those independent practices that might want to be part of a remodelling process.
So could we not have gone for the option that was put forward and developed by the staff themselves?
That one, we will be working with staff to implement. That is a service delivery model. It's not a strategic change model. So whilst that service delivery model that staff have put forward is fantastic, and we will be working with our 2C staff to implement those changes with them, it doesn't create a strategic environment for change to increase sustainability in other independent practices within the city.
Thanks. Yeah, I have got other questions, but I think they're probably best taken in private session.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, John. We'll come back to you later. Leslie Dunbar.
Thank you, Chair. My question's about the scope, if you like, for possibly a social enterprise model. If we're, like during the procurement, I understand that there's going to be some development and if you like, our support to develop bids for the procurement process. So it was to ask whether a social enterprise model might be considered as a way forward.
If I can come in there, Chair. Yeah. That is something that we discussed with the staff when they were putting in their proposal to be considered in the business plan, and it is something that that as part of the procurement process could be considered.
Leslie, do you want to come back?
When you're saying it could be considered, like at what point do you kind of decide whether it's suitable or not? I mean, could be, I suppose I'm looking for something a bit more definite. In terms of your answer.
I suppose if the decision is made to go through the procurement process, then a social enterprise model could be considered as part of that process and go through the same criteria as any other proposal.
So it wouldn't be written into, like the actual, like way in which people would make a bid.
Are you talking about the criteria for the procurement that anybody puts in, that the criteria around that? I suppose we would have to take advice on that from procurement and legal with regard to whether that would have any impact on other organisations that wanted to put in a prospective bid.
Okay.
Hey, Sandra, I saw your hand up a minute ago. Do you still want to come in? Or?
It's okay. I think Lorraine covered the point.
Okay. If I could just comment here, I mean, the complexity here is the need to have fair tender process and for the partnership, if you like, to be seen as an honest broker or an independent assessor of the bids that come in. So I think there are complexities about us wanting as a board to favour one model or one bidder over another. We can't do that. We can't favour a model or a bid. Leslie's made the point about the social enterprise model and that it's been discussed with staff already. There's a comment from Jess in the comments. I'll just bring up. So Jess's, so Councillor Dunbar's question about a social enterprise model is one that would be a matter for NHS procurement colleagues, I think. So Leslie, you still want to come back in on that?
No, I mean, I hear what people are saying in terms of, not limiting the kind of possibility of, models, in terms of bidders.
Yeah.
Or restraining it, constraining it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, it seems to me that social enterprise is definitely a way that's been as a model for healthcare. It is being looked as maybe providing wider opportunities in terms of, I think, particularly if you're trying to work with communities that you're located in. Anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Leslie. So Luann, then John Tomlinson, please.
Thanks, Sarah. I suppose for me, when reading the papers, the practice sustainability study just makes it very clear that there is a need to look at the whole system and not just focus on the 6 2C practices, because the system is very fragile, as that study indicates, and it has got worse in the 2 years in between when the studies were done. So I suppose I'm interested in unintended consequences of going down this route and how we can mitigate them. And it's maybe building on Leslie's point that I'm thinking about the staff involved and having personally experienced tendering processes. I know that type of change is really unsettling and really challenging for teams. So I just wanted to hear and to understand a bit more about what support the partnership will put in place around the 2Cs so that they can be involved in the tendering process in whatever way they choose to be involved, but that the partnership will put in support to them so that they can be active participants. I've got another question, but that's my first one.
Emma?
So if I take that one. So during this process, we have in a couple of our practices some clinical leads, and what we've done is gone to all our practices and said any member of staff, doesn't have to be clinical, from each practice will be funded to be able to attend meetings and workshops specifically representing their practice. So each 2C practice has the opportunity, and we create the capacity within the team for their practice to be represented when we're doing any smaller groups of discussion around the proposals put forward. We have regular update meetings with every practice manager as well to disseminate information sent down to the teams. And we also have regular briefings, and we talk about well-being meetings with staff and are there opportunities as well, and being cognizant of the fact that this staff don't just need representation for each practice. We need to ensure that individually we are looking after each other's well-being and providing services and signposting for those that do.
Okay, thanks, Emma. Can I ask a second question, Sarah? Is that okay? I suppose I'm thinking about the 6 2Cs, and they are very different in who they provide support to. So I just wanted to hear a bit more about how the needs of the specialised patient populations within the 2Cs currently will be considered and catered for in any tendering exercise.
Yes, we're very cognizant of the fact that we do have some specialised special populations within our 2C practices, and the procurement criteria will reflect that, especially in terms of ensuring that there are no negative impacts on either particular areas or particular characteristics.
Okay, thank you.
I saw Alistair Jemison's hand up a minute ago. I think that was on support, the question of support for practice staff. Alistair, do you want to make a comment?
Yeah, it was raised a few questions ago, but I thought it was answered by Lorraine and Emma. I think coming back particularly to the questions around things like digital solutions, I think that all that emphasise is that these solutions are supported better, I think, by larger groupings. Within practices, we have our commitment to see patients, to be doing all the stuff that we do, and then we have the digital solutions on top to trying actually to add that in small organisations, constrain them more. And I think my experience from using the digital solutions during the COVID time is how well it could work within blended larger groupings rather than smaller groupings. It also can support improved business models, which currently are certainly across the country. I'm not talking specifically about locally, are recognised by Scottish Government, Scottish GPC as being better done by the independent model, with an estimate of the 2C model costing about 1.5 to 2.5 times more to run than through the independent model. I think the use of digital has to be around improvement, but also does need to factor in the business modelling that can be supported by more collaborative, combined, larger organisations.
Okay, Alistair, thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you for that. Leslie, your hand's still up? Have you got a new question? No. Okay, so John Tomlinson and then Alan Gray, please.
Okay, thank you. Just looking at this, and as it was described as a strategic problem and the sustainability, I think that's a very significant part of the case here, and so that being necessary one way or another. And I think the board have been around this for a couple of months or more, and I think that's important to reflect on that in terms of trying to assure ourselves on the right decision here. And as part of that, and so I'm just checking my understanding here, as part of that, we have been assured around a degree of flexibility in the way this is being handled, and a number of that's been clarified or reconfirmed in the answers to questions. But one aspect of that would be, and this is me developing Councillor Cook's point in terms of the procurement. My understanding is that we go through the procurement if this is approved. If that doesn't result in something, then we go to Plan B. So if we were to go to Plan B, presumably at that point we would be coming back to the board to take stock. So that's my question: is that correct or not? And then I've got another question after that, but maybe if that can be answered first, please.
Okay. I mean, my understanding is that recommendation B, before I bring an officer in, is also about us progressing with Plan B, which is the ongoing internal development of 2C practices. So we have a twin tracker approach with procurement process, but also working on the service delivery options as Emma described them as well. Who wants to answer the question?
So yes, thank you, Councillor Duncan. That's exactly what we will be doing, supporting the development of that as well, and the usual due process in terms of developing that and then updating the IJB in the spring around how that's going will feed into that.
So the result going forward would be the plan A or the plan B, and there would be an outcome.
Yes.
Okay. And that's what we're deciding on here then, and that's just making that clear.
I could maybe come in there, Chair, if that's okay. So yeah, you're right in what you've said, John. If once we go through that process, if you know, we'll see what happens at the end of that. I mean, it's difficult to prejudge because we don't know what's going to happen, but we've tried to create as much flexibility as we possibly can around about the process. And then what would allow us to do then is to then take stock at the end of that and see where we land. I would say at that point in time, and whilst I wouldn't be, you know, I think there's good reasons that if we're able to go through a kind of procurement process and you've agreed that, then that's where it is. If there were, you know, for instance, maybe we didn't receive a bid for a potential practice or something like that, then we would need to pick that up in the update report to you and let you know what was happening around there. But certainly, as the other option will continue to be worked on, and once we've got all these pieces together, we can see where it lands and what happens as a result of that.
Okay, just to be absolutely clear, sorry, Sarah. So where it lands is there might be a decision and it will go forward on the basis of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
so
fine.
my understanding is that if we agree to go with the procurement option today, that will be progressed and we will have a report back in the spring. At which point the procurement process might not be concluded, but we will know what kind of bids we have, whether it covers all 6 practices or just a combination of them. And but if there is a successful procurement, so bids that meet the criteria that are set out in the exempt appendix that we can discuss later, then we don't need to make another decision as a board to award the contracts. That the contracts will be awarded. But as a board, we will get a progress update in the spring about what kind of bids have come in, how they're looking, you know, what officers' initial views are on those. And I think we probably have to take that in private session, to be honest, because we'll be discussing commercially sensitive things. But the board will get an update in the spring about the progress of the tender process.
Okay, and just further, this might be premature in terms of there might be lots more questions in detail, but from the point of view of I would be minded to support the recommendation on this, and I'm particularly thinking strategically that if we don't act, then we're responsible for a system which has negative consequences going forward, and for me that's an important aspect of this. Got one other just specific, and that's following up from Luann's question, which is around the sort of equalities or the impact on groups here. Page 157 states the equality impact assessment would come at the end of the procurement, and I understand how that's a kind of technical piece of work, but I just want to be assured how the equalities bit is actually within the procurement process, which was mentioned slightly earlier. If we need to take this in the private session, that's fine, but that's just a question for now or later. I just want to be assured of how that's incorporated.
I think when we discuss the PID, the project initiation document, which is the exempt appendix, I think we can cover that then.
Thank you.
I think it would be very difficult to answer your question properly without referring to that document.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, John. Alan Gray.
Yeah, it's really just picking up on something Sandra said at the start of this, and a reminder of what we're trying to do here. That whilst fully respect the complexity of the procurement involving staff, I think it's important today as a board we also send that signal about our commitment to the continuity of services and access to our patients and to the people served by the practices. And that as a board, that not only would want to go through this process and support the process, but we're also committed to the sustainability of the provision of primary care services and hopefully over time the improvement. So really just to make sure we're a balance in terms of recording our discussion, that we had also reflected the importance of our patient group, our commitment to supporting the patient group through all of this and providing access to services. And Alexandra picked it up and provide that reassurance at the start. So we're just keen to just register that point, Chair. That was okay. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ellen. Has anybody else got a question? No. Okay. Yes, Philip, I see your hand. Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is a very difficult question. Clearly, we're discussing ultimately a failed practice. Now I know that's to actually be discussed probably in the closed session. So that really does make it rather difficult to go along with these recommendations at the moment. Is really what I wanted to say.
So what do you mean by a failed practice?
Well, we're talking about Old Aberdeen. I mean, Old Aberdeen is no. Well, of course, that's a 2C practice that is in dire difficulty.
No, what we're talking about is the future of all 6 2C practices.
Yes, but we've got an example of one that really isn't doing terribly well.
We have one practice which has had a lot of attention and media coverage, and I've certainly been lobbied by patients from that practice, but it's one of 6 practices.
Right.
I think it would be helpful. I think you raise a really important point, Philip, and I think it would be helpful to have a comment on the work that's being done with Old Aberdeen practice. It's in the press that 5 of the GPs have resigned. Patients have contacted me concerned that their service is about to cease and they're not going to have access to primary care services. So I think it would be really helpful for Sandra or for Emma to give us an update on what's being done about Old Aberdeen and whether I would prefer if we could do that in a way that we could have it continue in the public session, but if we have to, we could go to the private session. But I would prefer us to give some information out about that work being done just now.
Oh, that's good, thank you.
Emma, I see you again.
Yeah, hello. So yeah, we have been having business continuity meetings. So that particular practice did highlight quite early on their concerns. So I have been meeting with the practices in the neighbouring areas to talk about business continuity planning. We have met with the GPs and the clinical teams within that particular practice as well, within Old Aberdeen, and have started business continuity planning. We have written up an options appraisal in terms of what solutions could be provided should there be continued clinical staff wanting to go and work in an independent model rather than remain in a 2C. And those have been worked up recently as well, and those are being sent to all clinical leads and LMC members for counsel and discussion and critique against those options as well. So we have lots of business continuity planning going on to mitigate that, to ensure that the patients of Old Aberdeen still continue to receive a service.
Philip, back to you.
So you've asked the doctors if they want to go for an independent model. I'm getting a bit confused here.
No. The Old Aberdeen medical practice, some of the doctors there have chosen to leave the practice and go and work in an independent practice.
Right.
Yes. So therefore we are.
So they don't like the 2C model, current 2C model.
I can't comment if that's their stance, but all I can say is that a few of the GPs in Old Aberdeen have left and are going to work in an independent practice. Therefore, we are business continuity planning to ensure that the patient and practice population still continue to receive a service. And that includes meeting with neighbouring practices and with the teams within the practice.
Okay, well, that really is quite important, that comment you just made, Emma, that in that the 2C practices clearly need to be remodelled, don't they? Clearly.
I think what the Old Aberdeen experience is showing is there is a serious issue of sustainability. You know, Old Aberdeen, I think Dr. Jemison's just put a comment in that Old Aberdeen isn't driving this proposal. It's not, we're not doing this to deal with issues about one single practice. We're doing it. Well, the recommendation has been brought forward and the work that's been done over the last 6 months has been done because of the practice sustainability survey that we've got in the pack, showing all those practices at red. You know, practices themselves using the Scottish Government's tool assess themselves as at risk. And I go back to Alan's point and also John's point about, you know, making sure that our whole system is high quality and is functioning. So that's why this work has been done. I think it's very easy, I suspect, especially when we're making a decision in public and there's a decision where there's a lot of patient and press interest. It's very easy to focus on an issue that's being highlighted by patients and by the press, but that's not the rationale. Now, Old Aberdeen is not the reason we are here today discussing this paper. Part of this paper perhaps prompted some of the issues that have arisen in Old Aberdeen recently. So, but Old Aberdeen's situation has not driven this paper. This is not how we would deal with one practice in this situation.
Yeah,
We don't want more practices to end up in this situation if you like had Torry, Cardiff and Rosemount.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Chair. I fully appreciate that. It's just, it is actually quite interesting, though, that you know, it's probably coincidence from what you're saying, but 1 out of 6 could be 1 out of 10, could be 1 out of 100. It doesn't matter. It's one that's failed, that's really in a very, very poor state. So clearly something needs to be done.
I don't think it's fair to describe Old Aberdeen as failing. I think it's, you know, I think it's in a precarious position right now, but as Emma has told us, there's business continuity work going on. And I wouldn't want patients to be watching this meeting later on the web and thinking, oh my God, I haven't got a GP anymore. That's not the case. There is still a service being provided at Old Aberdeen. We want to continue providing the service.
Okay,
I don't want people to come away from this meeting with the wrong impression and worried they don't have access to primary care in Old Aberdeen, because that's not the case.
That's good. Okay, great. So some of the academics at the university need to know that then, rather than sending email to all and sundry. Thank you.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to get emails. Always. Okay, I see John's hand again. No, obviously.
Yeah, apologies for that. Yeah.
No, it's fine. I have a question, because so as I've just said, we have been lobbied a lot by patients. I think who as is often the case, people get worried about whether or not, if they feel unwell, they're going to be able to access healthcare close to where they live. 2 of these practices cover very deprived, or 2 of the most deprived areas of Aberdeen, Torry and Old Aberdeen, which covers bits of Seaton and Tillydrone. We've got very vulnerable practice population served by Marywell, our homeless practice. Is the tender process going to allow us to make us firm commitment today still will be local access to medical services in those communities?
So, Councillor Duncan, yes, the strict criteria process will ensure that those populations are protected and that no tender would be awarded that puts any practice population at a disadvantage or in any form of situation of inequalities.
Okay, right, yeah, because that's very important.
It's extremely important and at the forefront of the criteria process. 100%, I agree.
Okay, so to patients who are saying you are taking away my GP, particularly the patients from Old Aberdeen, what would your answer to them be just now?
My answer to the patients at the moment, if they said you've taken my GP away from Old Aberdeen, would be the GP has decided to leave and go and work in an independent contractor model, and that's up to that GP, and we will continue to strive to meet services for you.
Okay, that's fine, thank you. So anybody else got any comments or questions about this? Right. Okay, we'll move to the recommendations then. So actually, I think we'll have to come back to this. If people have got questions on the exempt appendix, which is the procurement process, no, we can make the decision to go ahead with the procurement. Actually, if people have got questions on the procurement process, which is in the exempt appendix, can we make a decision to go to procurement without hearing those questions first? Derek, do you want to give me some advice on this?
Certainly, Chair. What you can do as you've done, move there to suggest you're going to go to recommendations. Any of the voting members can then say to you they would rather defer making that decision until the private session. Okay. The members have already been aware of the content of the papers. If they're satisfied with understanding of the exempt business, they can still make their decision just now. If they would rather discuss it further in private, you can make the recommendation just now to defer until private session.
Okay, thank you, Derek. I should have checked that with you before the meeting. I had other things on my mind. So I propose to move to the recommendations and make a direct decision on the recommendations just now. Does any board member wish to defer that decision because they feel they need more information on the material provided in the exempt appendix? No. Okay. Right. So we'll move to the recommendations then. So we're on page 118 of the pack. So it's recommended that the IJB endorses, approves and gives agreement to proceed with the implementation for the preferred option outlined in paragraph 3.7 to enable the remodelling of the 2C GP practices. Notes the intended procurement process to implement the preferred option, if approved, as at Appendix B, C and D exempt, to be delivered in conjunction with ongoing internal developments with the 2C practices supported by the Health and Social Care Partnership, makes the direction as attached to Appendix E and instructs the Chief Officer to issue the direction to NHS Grampian, and D, requests that an update on the outcomes of the procurement process is brought back to the IJB in spring 2021. Is everybody content to approve all four of those recommendations? John Cook?
I hate to do this, but I've got severe reservations.
Okay. Right.
Do you want me to expand on that, or
yes,
do others want to come in?
Yeah.
I completely and totally support the idea that we need to do something strategic to enhance the sustainability of primary care right across the city. So I'm happy with the bit about ongoing internal development. But I think if we're just looking at the 2C practices in isolation, that for me is not a strategic approach that's looking citywide. In terms of some of the advantages that have been set out for the preferred option, I'm just not completely convinced. and I'm worried about where a tender process might end up. So I don't feel able to support going to a tender process at this point.
Okay, right. So your first reservation is about strategic approach. So the strategic approach for primary care in the whole city is our primary care improvement plan. Okay, which isn't, I mean, it's referred to extensively in the papers, but that's the strategic approach, the implementation of multidisciplinary teams, the expenditure on new staff in primary care practices across the city, revising pharmacy allocation, you know, actually, and also part of our capital project to look at new primary care facilities in the city, particularly in the north of the city. So there's a strategic element there that covers the whole of primary care. This is about sustainability and the advantages, as Dr. Jemison said earlier, of larger practices to have the capacity to implement change, which we're struggling with in the smaller practices at the moment, and also to share services, share staff, share systems, do systems changes. So that's the strategic question. On your reservations about the procurement process, I think you're going to have to give us more detail about exactly why you are uncomfortable with the procurement process just now, and see if we can address those concerns in further discussion.
On your point about the primary care improvement plan, I totally agree with everything that you've said, but I just think we're kind of taking a small amount of primary care in this paper and looking at the procurement process rather than looking at primary care in totality. And my reservation is around the procurement process is really following on from the initial questions I had. Where's it going to end up? Might we be in a situation where a private sector company bids, doesn't get the contract, and we end up being sued by them, and we end up having to pay compensation to them in the event that we lost in the courts? And I just don't feel comfortable about taking that risk.
Okay. Does that risk for you outweigh the risk of other GP practices in Aberdeen not being sustainable? The actual systemic risk that we have in primary care in the city at the moment, as evidenced in the paperwork we've got before us today.
I agree that we do have that systemic risk. I just think there are other ways, or I'd like to see more discussion of other ways to fix it.
Okay, right. Can I hear some other contributions from other people in the board then, please, about this? John?
Yeah, I suppose that the way you posed that, Chair, was the question, and that's what I was trying to weigh up. And I suppose I was coming down on the side that yes, we need to go in with our eyes open, but there is a potential risk there, and I would weigh that up as lower than that stopping us from going forward.
Okay, thank you, John. Howard?
I think I'm worried about the unintended consequences, really. It looks to me like from the consultation process. The slightly cynical view I could take is that people haven't liked it because it hasn't given the answer they want. And I have a lot of experience in the health service where I've seen that sort of behaviour a lot. But on the other hand, I think that if it does feel as though people are unhappy with where we've ended up, and they might well vote with their feet, as we've seen in Old Aberdeen. And I'm not sure we could cope with too much of that at this stage. So I guess in that sense, I'm not so worried about the legal action side of things. I just worry about individuals voting with their feet, to be honest. And although it's not about Old Aberdeen, the Old Aberdeen thing is a good example of perhaps what I mean.
Okay, so you're worried. Yeah. Okay. Can an officer give us more information about this business continuity planning that Emma has been talking about, and what are we doing to mitigate the risk of staff just up and leaving us unable to provide a service? Sandra.
So thank you, Chair. Absolutely understand the concerns, and I think as Emma will come back in with the business continuity, but you will be aware that, and I think Emma highlighted that during the consultation, during the workshops, some of the practices, the practice in question had indicated that if things had not went the way that they had, chosen, that the resignation and resigning might well be options. So from that point of view, that we fully understand and fully support staff to try to work through things. Change, as I said at the start, is a very difficult process, but at the same time, it's the wider strategic impact that we have and its sustainability issues. We've had numerous practices, I think, as you've highlighted, Chair, failing across the past couple of years, and we want to make sure that we've got sustainable moving forward. To say that at any point a practice, if we stop the change because of the worry about staff resigning or not having staff, that's exactly the reason that we're moving into this position in the first place, is because that's exactly what's caused other practices to become unsustainable, and we've had to step in and support them, as highlighted at the start. So I'm not quite sure if that answers your question exactly, Howard, but Emma as well will come in on any of the sustainabilities, Chair.
Okay, yeah. If we could get some more detail about sustainability, Emma.
So we have all our business continuity plans, and what I was thinking is if it would assure the group, we could share those outside of here. I don't have them to hand in this meeting. However, if there is some more assurance required around those business continuity plannings and how we would utilise other staffing groups and the options that we're putting forward to consider Old Aberdeen or any practices should more clinical staff choose to go and work within an independent model. So if you feel that would be useful, Chair, we could provide some of that detail for you.
Thank you, Emma. We'll come back to that offer. Thank you. Luann.
Yeah, just some reflections, and particularly for Councillor Cook. I suppose there's been a lot of conversations within seminar for IJB members on this, and for me personally, it's taken me a long time to consider and weigh up all the risks and get to a position where I am today, where I do think that the strategic risk we have to, which is the greatest one, is the fragility of the whole system. But it's taken me some time to work through that to make sure that the decision we take is actually for the best interests of all the population of Aberdeen. And the seminars and briefings that we've had have been really helpful in helping me get to that point. And I'm just recognising that maybe Councillor Cook hasn't had that same background that I've benefited from. And just a point on the tendering process that John raised about. Well, I'm not quite sure how what I heard when you were saying it is about it's too narrow because it's focusing on the 2 Cs and we should be wider. But my understanding is we can only put out the 2 Cs out to tender because these are the only ones within the control within NHS at the moment. And the hope is that by doing so, that will stimulate the wider primary care partners in the city to take some of these smaller practices under their wings, so that in future, when a GP or 2 GPs retire, we've already got a system in place where practices are used to taking on smaller practices, and it's just no big deal. You know, we see someone's heading towards retirement and there can be a succession plan built in with neighbouring practices to bring that that smaller practice in-house. And it just means for the public that is seamless, that's all happening behind the scenes, and it doesn't need to create a really anxious time for members of the public when a local GP is stepping down or someone senior in the team's stepping down. So it was just to add that in, that this is really important, and it's taken me a while to get to this point, but I am certain that it's the vulnerability of the whole system and this tender is the first step on that journey that we would be taking, and not the end goal at all, because there has to be lots more work, whatever the outcome of the tender is. So that's where I am really. I don't know if that helps John at all and where he's at, but I do recognise the risks too.
Thank you, Luann. John, do you want to make a quick comment back before I take Mike Adams in?
Yeah, just to say, I probably didn't express it very clearly when I was saying I wasn't saying we should tender the whole thing, because I totally get what you mean about we can only tender the ones of which we have control rather than the others. It just seemed to me that the strategic problem is the sustainability of general practice as a whole, and this is kind of just looking at a slice of it. So that was what I was trying to say. I probably didn't say it very clearly.
But I think the point, John, is that if we put it out to tender, we may well have practices in Aberdeen who bid to take over some of these 2C practices, making those practices larger and more sustainable. So actually having a tender process actually helps our the 23 other practices in the city, the majority of whom feel that they're at risk at the moment. And it's coming back to Dr. Jemisin's point he made when he was talking about digital and capacity for change and capacity for systems change and sharing staff. By allowing this, we are giving an opportunity for the other 23 independent practices to do something to improve their own sustainability. Yeah. Okay, Mike Adams.
Yeah, so this is nae an opinion, and this is nae joining into this, but it is. It would be remiss of me to add some context. I'm sure there are others have been around here since the Shadow Board days, so it's reflecting back on that. During that time, there probably been half a dozen GP practices. The way to that for one reason or another, retirements, etc., needed to be changed. The way to do it at that time was, they became 2C.